And we're live. Welcome one and welcome all. My name's Dave.
I'm Steve.
I'm Nudge.
And a famous one for you tonight. I'm sure everybody will be fairly au fait with this particular case. A favourite one of mine because it helped get me started. And one of the prime investigators wrote a book which inspired me to want to become an investigator in the first place, the Enfield Poltergeist. So a lot to get through tonight. There's a lot of people involved in the case, lots of events that surround the case, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a case that occurred between 1977 to 1978 in Enfield, North London, 284 Green Street, which is probably down as one of the most witnessed and longest poltergeistic activity in history, probably. Yeah, you know, so there's a lot of activity went on at the property, as I say. Okay, so poltergeist definition pretty much comes from the German word meaning noisy ghost, rumble ghost, noisy spirit, that kind of thing, as I'm sure everybody's aware. And early reports were found in the 1st century, mainly coming from Asia, but other places too. And took off in the 17th century. Reports started to come out of Europe and became very commonplace. But for the most part affects teenage girls, but women from 8 to 78 have been, reported being effective. And there seems to be some correlation to the hypothalamus area of the brain because activities increase there during paranormal and poltergeist episodes, though the reasons are not fully understood as to why that's the case. Most manifestations usually last around 6 months, but, some cases have persisted for years. Like I say, the Enfield case is one of the longer ones that is known, and phenomena reported it can be anything from banging, tapping, knocking, scraping, objects levitating, objects being thrown, furniture being overturned, people being dragged, people levitating or even thrown around, voices being heard and things being burned, words and phrases that can be written in, I don't know, mud, blood and even excrement. Animals and cattle can be attacked. And a lot of the time, possession accompanies poltergeist manifestations also. One of the early ones in the UK is the Mackay or Rerick poltergeist in the 17th century. Like I say, in 1696, and was covered by Alexander Telfair, who was a minister of what denomination, I'm not entirely sure. And he basically told a story of a family in stonemasons in Oakencairn in Scotland. And family members were pulled and attacked. Buildings were set on fire and notes were written in blood. And the disembodied phantom arm was seen, apparently. And people were hit by rocks and sticks that seemingly came from nowhere. This is townspeople and neighbours and so on and so forth. And Telfair was one of the earliest authors of poltergeist activity, writing a pamphlet called A True Relation of an Apparition, Expressions and Actings of a Spirit, which infested the house of Andrew Mackay in Ringcroft of Stocking in the Porrock of Rerick. Is the Stewartry of Kirkcudbride in Scotland by Alexander Telfair, minister of that paroch, and attested by many other persons who are also eye and ear witnesses. If anything, Alexander, you're probably going to go down in history as having one of the longest book titles as well. But it's an early one, like I say, and in the UK, so worthy of note for that. Fundamentally, the differences between hauntings and poltergeists is kind of arena for the most part by your layperson. But hauntings tends to be location focused for hauntings and last for many years, it'll be decades or even centuries, and poltergeist activity tends to be person focused and usually lasts for just weeks or sometimes months before it starts to quieten down. And before we go into the timeline of the events, we know it's the Hodgson family, which was single mother Peggy, eldest daughter Margaret, the next daughter down, or second daughter Janet, 11, who was the primary focus for the attention of the poltergeist activity, or alleged poltergeist activity, Johnny, 10, and Billy, 7. Lived in, like I say, 284 Green Street. John Burkham, who was the brother of Peggy, Sylvia Burkham, his wife, who also lived on Green Street. So quickly, before we start to go with a rundown of that, a little bit of an idea as to what type of things can be expected during a poltergeist type of event. I'll just do this with you people. I'm going to share the screen so you can see a little bit of a video, a bit of a thing I've knocked up to show you what I'm talking about. You'll be au fait with a great deal of this.
think you've got to experience it yourself to know what I'm talking about, really.
Guys, have you seen it? Whoa. How is that possible? Come on, it's in a jar.
Okay, so some of the stuff that you might see at a poltergeist type of event there. Well, a quick look at the location as well. So bear with me, and I'll share that little slideshow of the location. To all intents and purposes, a very, very normal house. Nothing special about it. I suppose the only thing that you could call special is the fact that there was activity going on there. This has become the stuff of legend in the paranormal community, the paranormal scene, and of course films made about it, many documentaries. So you'll be fairly versed in this, people, I'm sure. So the infamous Green Street where the events took place. Multiple people involved on Green Street. Obviously, the Hodgson family themselves, the Burkhams and the Nottinghams, who were the neighbours who Peggy Hodgson approached in the first place, which we'll cover when we go through the timeline. So this is the house over the years, obviously taken throughout various times in history. And, you know, like I say, to all intents and purposes, nondescript, not what you would, well, I suppose you couldn't say that, but it doesn't look anything out of the ordinary. But obviously, we're led to believe that it's far from ordinary. There you go, more modern day one there. Okay, let's have a look at the family members. Again, you see most of these images. I'm fairly sure of that. I'll quickly show you the family members that were involved. Again, mainly centered around Peggy for the beginning. The bangs and such were being heard. This soon transpired into, of course, Janet being the center of attention. Bear with me, people. Okay, so there's the family there. Thanks for the ding. So the girls who were primarily targeted, if you like, by the poltergeist. The sons, obviously one was away at boarding school for a big chunk of it, did experience some phenomena, which we'll go through, like I say, in the timeline, but otherwise pretty much centered around the two girls and primarily Janet. And like I say, Peggy heard banging and noises at first, but of course things went a lot more intense, which was then focused around Janet, who's on the left there. Go into more detail about that, obviously, when Steve does the timeline. There's Janet. Okay, so the Enfield Poltergeist, very famous, very well known, very well covered, many documentaries, many people on YouTube have done things about this. And like I say, it holds a certain place in my heart because of a book that was wrote by Guy Playfair, one of the principal investigators of the case. I know I read this in 1982, something like that, I believe, maybe 1983, but it was very, very, very interesting, drew me in, and of course I wanted to know more about it. But there is so much to cover about it, so I suppose what we need to do is pass it over to Steve and start to go through the timeline of events. Steve, if you'd be so kind.
Most certainly will, my friend. Oh, excuse me. Bit of a frog in the throat there. Okay, I'm just going to pull up the timeline for you now. It's on there for you, Dave. Okay. Enfield Poltergeist, timeline of paranormal occurrences. Here's a list of every milestone, major event, and significant visit to the house. This timeline covers the house's most active periods from August 77 to October 1978, as well as a few isolated events in 1979. So we're going to pretty much look at everything that's, well, like I said, major to it. Okay.
That's fine with me.
All right. So Tuesday the 30th of August 1977. This is when it all began. Previously, they had heard several odd knocks and bangs around the house, but on Tuesday the 30th of August, as the children were settling down to bed, things began to escalate. Janet told her mum that her brother, Billy's bed, was going all funny and moving of its own accord. The Hodgsons came soon to the conclusion that their house was indeed haunted. Wednesday the 31st of August 1977. This is the call for help. The following night at 9:30, Peggy heard a noise coming from the back bedroom. She went into the room to tell the children to stop messing around, but her daughter Janet told her that the noise was coming from the chest of drawers near the doorway. Peggy then witnessed it herself. The drawers shuffled forward across the lino flooring out into the room. Peggy tried to push it back against the wall, only to find that it moved again. The third time she tried to push it back, she couldn't move it at all. It was as if an invisible force was stopping it. At this point, the family had seen enough and rushed next door to the neighbours, the Nottinghams, who Dave alluded to earlier on. Vic was a roofer, so suspected that there might be something wrong with the structure of the house, which was causing the furniture to move. He went in alone to look around and claimed that he heard distinct knocking sounds that seemed to follow him around the rooms and also around the house. Thursday, early morning, the 1st of September 1977, the police arrived. Later that night, Peggy Nottingham called the police. 1 a.m, 2 officers arrived and checked the house over, but said there was nothing they could do to help them as no crime had actually been committed. However, before they left the house, Constable Caroline Heaps saw an ordinary kitchen chair, which was near the sofa in the living room, began to wobble before sliding about a metre across the floor towards the kitchen as if it was being pulled. She said it seemed to rise about half an inch into the air before it began moving. On Sunday the 4th of September, it was yet again another disturbed night.
Okay, I just want to go back over something regarding the when the police were went round to visit. Is the WPC Caroline Heap is like a signed affidavit, written affidavit about it. And she also, she said it rose up into the air about half an inch, and then slid to the right across the floor about 3 to 4 foot. And she tried to find out the reason for doing it. The constable that was with her also went looking around the house, testing pipes and other things as well to see if it could possibly be that, even check the attic. And the eldest son had pointed to the chair, which drew the attention of WPC Heaps to the fact that something was going on. After the fact that she couldn't find out what was responsible for the chair moving, she placed a marble on the floor to see if she could get it to roll. But it's just good police in my eyes. That she also checked for wires underneath the cushions, underneath the pillows that were lying around, for to see if there was any kind of dodginess going on, if you like. So it's not like they just turned up at the location, saw the chair move, and then that was the end of it. WPC Heaps, Caroline Heaps, is on the right there. And of course, finding nothing, the police pretty much wrote it off because nobody was breaking the law. And quite frankly, they couldn't do anything about it. So that was pretty much the end of the police involvement. Steve, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, certainly. Say Sunday the 4th of September, after another evening of strange goings on, Peggy Nottingham phoned the Daily Mirror in the hope they would be able to put her in touch with someone who could help. They sent along reporter Douglas Bence and photographer Graham Morris, who became regulars at the house. The Hodgsons were next door when the journalist arrived, so they took a look round the empty house on their own. They spent all night in the house and found nothing unusual. But before they left at 2:30, they told the Hodgsons that the coast was clear and the family headed back home so the children could finally go to bed. and they were accompanied by Doug and Graham. The second they walked back into the house, Lego and marble started to be thrown around. Both men witnessed the flying objects, and Graham was even hit in the head by a Lego brick which shot across the room at him.
Yeah, Graham was hit above the right eye in the right eyebrow by a yellow Lego brick, yeah.
And the way it's written there, it makes it sound as though stuff was literally just thrown about. But from some of the descriptions, it was like they were stood in the room and these things were sort of flying around them, like circling them. So it's not just like as though something was being lobbed at them willy-nilly. So just to say that, sorry about that. Monday the 5th of September, Maurice Gross's first visit. George Fallows, a senior reporter from the Daily Mirror, visited the house to follow up on the story, this time with photographer David Thorpe. The paper had contacted the Society for Psychical Research for advice and had brought along one of their newest members, an eager new investigator by the name of Maurice Gross. Speaking about his first visit to the house, he said, "I found chaos. The whole family was congregated in the house together with the neighbours next door, and there were a lot of very frightened people there."
I think it needs to be mentioned also about Maurice Gross that he was a businessman, an inventor, an electronics engineer, and an artist. He was a veteran of Dunkirk. You know, he fought in the war. He was well decorated, and had tried in the past to make contact with his daughter, who had been killed in a road accident. Yeah. And that's one of them to want to become a paranormal investigator.
And can I just add that everybody of a certain age would probably have seen Maurice Gross's most famous invention, which was the rotating adverts at bus stops. That's what he invented. Right, do you want me to carry on from there?
Yeah, absolutely, carry on.
He advised Peggy to stay calm and recommended that she made a diary of every incident that occurred. On Thursday, the 8th of September, Maurice is convinced by the case. Maurice was back in the house on Wednesday, again joined by reporters from the Daily Mirror. At 1:15 a.m. on the 8th of September, they all witnessed a loud crash coming from the girl's bedroom. They rushed in to find the two sisters asleep, but a chair which was beside the bed had flipped over and moved a metre across the room. This was enough to convince Maurice that the case was warranting further investigation. I think I've just flipped back on one, just 1 second. Yeah, Saturday the 10th of September, the house of strange happenings that it was becoming to be known. The Hodgson story became front page news as the Daily Mirror broke the story and described how the family were living in fear of strange goings on that are driving them from their home. That evening, Peggy also appeared on a radio phone-in show on London station LBC. The show, Nightline, aired from 10:30 until 1 a.m. and Peggy and Maurice supporting Peggy were there for the duration. On Sunday the 11th of September, the BBC arrived at the house. When Peggy arrived home after the LBC show at 2 a.m, waiting outside for her was Rosalind Morris, a journalist from BBC Radio 4 show The World This Weekend. Ros stayed most of the night and witnessed a chair move and a bed shake. She also interviewed Peggy and Maurice, and her findings were broadcast that afternoon. On Monday the 12th of September, this is one of the significant ones, is Guy Leon Playfair. He first visited the house. Guy Leon Playfair, another member of the Society of Psychical Research and an author, had just finished his latest book on the paranormal and was looking forward to a well-earned holiday. But after responding to the SPR's appeal for help, he decided to cancel his break and assist Maurice at Enfield. He thought he would just pop over once or twice. Instead, on the 12th of September, Guy made his first of 180 visits to the house, of which that included 25 all-night vigils.
I think it also needs to be said about Guy Playfair that he'd had experiences investigating poltergeist activity in South America before this. He was as far as Maurice Gross is concerned, he was a seasoned veteran. Maurice Gross was a bit of a newbie, really, to both the SPR and paranormal investigation. So it needs to be noted that Guy Playfair had experience in investigating poltergeist activity and had been seen firsthand events, the type of phenomena that you see during poltergeist activity in South America.
Yeah, when it came to like TV and radio interviews, he was the one that they seemed to go to when they were doing anything regarding poltergeist, because, like you say, he did have that first-hand know-how on it. You want to carry on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Sunday, the 25th of September, refuge John and Sylvia's. Once again, the family were chased out of their house by the strange happenings, and this time they sought refuge in Peggy's brother, John Burkham's home. While his wife Sylvia was making a cup of tea, a piece from a child's toy appeared in front of her face and then dropped to the kitchen counter. This marked the first time the activity happened outside of 284 Green Street. It seemed that the poltergeist was able to follow the family. Saturday the 22nd of October, Rosalind Morris's second visit. The BBC's Rosalind Morris visited the Hodgsons for a second time. This time she was armed with her tape recorder and managed to record several instances of unexplained knocking sounds, at one point capturing 30 rapping sounds in the space of just a quarter of an hour. On Saturday the 29th of October, the frequent paranormal occurrences were keeping Janet awake at night and affecting her schoolwork. The council refused to rehouse the family but agreed to send them away for a week-long break at Clacton-on-Sea during the half-term. The whole family went, including Johnny, who was home from boarding school for the holidays. Saturday the 5th of November, the famous knock once for no and twice for yes. It was bonfire night, and while fireworks were banging away outside, the Hodgson's house played host to bangs of a different kind. It was the day the family got back from their holiday, and during their time away, Morris had decided to try to communicate with the poltergeist using knocks. He started off by asking the spirit questions like, "Can you tell me what 5 and 5 is?" And after hearing the correct number of knocks, moved on to specific questions like, "Did you die in this house?"
Okay, well, let's play a clip of the knock video to give people this. If we got it, we may as well use it. So I'll play you this, everybody. This is going to be, like I say, a slide of the event.
And then something happened, which was very funny indeed.
Knock 1 for no and 2 for yes. Are you a male spirit? 1 for no and 2 for yes. Yes, 2. You are a male spirit. Did you used to live in this house? You did. Was it more than 50 years ago? Yes. Did you die in this house? Did you pass on? You did pass on in this house. Now, why are you here? Are you unhappy? You're not unhappy. But why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? No. You don't want to give us a special message. Are you having a game with me? Oh, right.
Oh, gross.
As I asked the question, are you having a game with me? It threw the cardboard box and the pillow right at my face. Well, thank you very much. That was a very good answer.
Certainly sets the scene, that one, doesn't it? Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Okay, carry on. Yep. Monday the 10th of November, it's Janet's 12th birthday. Guy Playfair invited an Argentinian psychic who was working in London to visit the house. Eduardo Balanovsky arrived armed with a magnetometer, which they used to look for anomalies in the electromagnetic field around the girls. During their vigil, Janet's pillow was twice thrown across the room, and each time Eduardo's equipment showed a change in EM field strength. On Saturday, 12th of November, at 5 a.m, Janet was tipped out of her bed while sleeping, along with a mattress which landed on top of her. Now wide awake, Peggy decided to make contact using a technique the investigators had suggested to her. She placed pens and paper around the house and called out to the spirit saying, "Leave me a message." 5 minutes later, she found a note on the fridge saying, "I will stay in the house. Do not read this to anyone or I will retaliate." Late November 1977, on the evening of November the 26th, 1977, John Burkham went into the girl's bedroom to check on his nieces. He was amazed to find her asleep on top of a radio, which was on top of a chest of drawers. The Mirror's Graham Morris was on hand to capture the moment on his camera. What made this more incredible was that Janet was out cold, having been given 10 milligram of Valium by doctors earlier in the day after experiencing a violent seizure of some kind. On the evening of November the 28th, within the space of 5 minutes, Morris found Janet asleep under her bed twice. According to Morris, she was completely limp, as if unconscious. Later that night, Janet and a mattress were thrown onto the floor, and 20 minutes after that, she was found in the corner on the floor, having apparently been thrown a distance of over 4 meters. The Brazilian psychic Luis Gasparetto became the first medium to visit the house, and he arrived in late November along with his interpreter, Elsie Dubugras.
Okay, let's have a look at Louis here. Got pictures to show, Steve.
Yeah, no props.
Okay, so let's have a look at our Louis. Good old Louis. If I can get him up. There we go. Okay, so we got Louis. Famous. So you say he's Argentinian, this gentleman, I believe.
Yeah.
Of course, accompanied by his interpreter, Elsie Dubugras.
She was a member of the healing department of Sao Paulo State Spiritualist Federation. They offered spiritual help to the family, which resulted in some temporary relief. Louise is a skilled... Oh, is that her?
That's Elsie, yes.
Hi, Elsie. How are you doing? Louis is a skilled spiritual artist. He's able to produce drawings and paintings while in trance-like states with his eyes closed, something that it seemed that Janet was clearly impressed by. Thursday, the 1st of December, Janet produced a series of 9 drawings. Each one was described as being very disturbing and all featured elements of blood, death, and knives. Janet drew
I
these.
think we should show these.
Yeah.
Let's get the video up. Again, another slideshow which will be showing the some of the drawings that Janet done. Entire screen. There we go. So go on, Steve. These are the drawings that Janet Hodgson done.
Yeah, she drew these images while in a semi-conscious state, and she had no memory afterwards of having drawn them. Maurice Groves said, I think this is the best case this century as far as documentation is concerned, and it may be the best case of all time. Just after 1 a.m., Janet was pulled from her bed on Saturday the 3rd of December while sleeping. Later, she described the event as feeling as though she was pulled by her arm. What makes the incident different to other times that Janet was thrown from her bed was this time she landed outside the bedroom. Peggy said she saw the bedroom door open and Morris found her sliding down the stairs, head first, still asleep. On Monday the 5th of December, David Roberts visits. David Roberts, a student physicist, joined Morris and Guy at the house. He was recommended by a Society of Psychical Research contact of Guy's, Professor John Hasted, a physicist at London's Birkbeck College. David then became a full-time member of the team. On Saturday,
I think we've got a picture of John Hasted as well.
Oh, even better.
I think we've got a picture of John Hasted. Yes, we do. Here we go. Where's John Hasted? I'm not sure what area this was taken in, but I'll share it. Again, for the most part, this case was a long list of famous alumni within the field for that era. That's definitely without a shadow of a doubt. And there's John Hasted. Okay, go on, Steve.
Sorry, excuse me. Saturday the 10th of December, 2 more Society of Psychical Research members visited the house on December the 10th. Dr. John Beloff, the head of Edinburgh University Psychology Department, and Anita Gregory from North London Polytechnic. While they were there, Morris, as advised by Professor Hasted, challenged the poltergeist to speak. At first, the researchers witnessed a series of whistles and dog-like barks, but before long, a gruff male voice came from Janet. The voice sounded like that of an elderly man, and the researchers were convinced it was not the voice of a 12-year-old girl.
Okay, I think we've got an example of the barks and whistles. Again, play that for the people. Now, these were the first sort of interactions, really, weren't they?
Yeah, Yeah, this is when it sort of made its appearance, and then from there it sort of escalated.
Because he'd asked it to say his name at some stage, I believe, too.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, let's play a snippet of that. Again, due to the good old YouTube, we can only play certain excerpts of this, people, so you'll have to bear with me a second. You've also got to bear in mind the technology that was, going around at these days was very, very limited when it comes to paranormal investigation. Not the kind of stuff that we try to use these days.
The SPR actually tried to digitize some of these, but some of the tapes were.
Let me hear you say my name. Come on, let me hear you say my name. That's not my name. Come on, my name's Morris. Let me hear you say it. Morris.
So, of course, like there's an example of the barking type noises that were being heard, recorded at the location there.
Yep, the voice eventually identified itself as Joe Watson, and as you've just heard, the old conversation was caught on tape by Morris. But the following evening, Joe was replaced by the voice of another spirit. Tuesday, the 13th of December, after making contact with the spirit of William Bill Wilkins for the first time the previous night, Morris brought his son to the house to speak to the now very chatty poltergeist. Richard Gross, who was obviously Morris Gross' son, was a newly qualified solicitor, making this the first time a poltergeist had ever been cross-examined by a solicitor. He asked, "What happened when you died?" And the gruff voice answered that it had died of a hemorrhage. He said, "I went blind, I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died on a chair in the corner downstairs."
Well, let's play that. Because we've also got that. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
I want you to tell me whether you remember what happened to you when you died. Just before you died and just after you died.
Days before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
Interesting.
Okay, Wednesday the 14th of December, like I say, one of the major players in paranormal activity and the investigation at the time, Hugh Pincott, visited the house. He was the founder of the Association of Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, ASAP, and Society of Psychical Research member Hugh Pincott visited the house in mid-December to see how his colleagues were getting on with the investigation. The following day, 15th of December, one of the most important days at the house and one that provided some of the most compelling evidence, which was corroborated by two independent witnesses. David Robertson was sat outside the girl's bedroom while automatic cameras were set up inside the room. David was trying to encourage Janet to levitate. To start with, objects including pillows and books started moving around. One red cushion even ended up on the roof of the house. The investigator said it couldn't have been thrown out of the window as the window was hard to open and it would have made a noise which David would have been able to hear from outside the room. Although the poltergeist, speaking through Janet, said that David wasn't allowed in the room to witness its tricks, it hadn't taken into account those passing by on the street below. Hazel Shaw was a local lollipop lady. She worked on the pedestrian crossing outside the Hodgson's house, which served the school opposite. At 11:45 a.m, she was returning to work from her lunchtime shift when she noticed a red cushion on the roof of number 284. And while she was looking up at the house, she heard a bang and saw a book hit the front bedroom window. Next, she saw a pillow fly across the room. And in a statement later, Hazel said, "When I looked up, a candy-striped pillow hit the window as well. That came after the books, and I was I don't know if I was frightened or not, just fascinated. The windows were still closed. Then after a little while, I saw Janet. The lollipop lady watched Janet as she appeared to levitate inside the bedroom window. She described the occurrence as though Janet was going up and down, as though someone was just tossing her up and down bodily in a horizontal position, like as if someone had got hold of her legs and back and throwing her hair up and down. Hazel wasn't the only witness to this event. A local tradesman by the name of John Rainbow was also passing the house that morning, and he too saw Janet floating around her bedroom and said he even saw her banging against the window. Could Janet have just been bouncing on a bed? Hazel said. I don't know if there's a bed underneath that window, but she seemed to think bouncing was out of the question. I definitely saw her come up about window height, but I thought if she was bouncing, she'd bounce from her feet. She wouldn't be able to get enough power to bounce off her back and come up that high, but she was definitely lying horizontally, coming up and down. Do you want to carry on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yep. Saturday the 17th of December, British author and healer Matthew Manning paid a visit to the house before Christmas. He is known for his psychic abilities and spoke to Bill at great length. While in the house, he also witnessed the microphone, a guy's tape recorder, fall off its own accord and break. That same day, the tape recorder went missing, and despite searching the whole house, no trace of it was found. Later in the day, Matthew and Guy heard a crash and ran upstairs to find that a chest of drawers had been pushed over. His tape recorder, which had been hidden underneath, was now in plain sight. On Monday the 19th of December, an American magician and paranormal researcher, Milbourne Christopher, visited the house while in London. First, he used his skills to impress the children by performing several illusions, and later he caught Janet sneaking out of bed and peering down the stairs as if planning a stunt. Milbourne believed that this was an obvious sign of trickery and wrote the case off as a possible hoax. On Friday the 23rd of December, 2 days before Christmas, the family woke up to find their two pet goldfish had both mysteriously died during the night. When talking to the spirit of Bill through Janet later in the day, the voice said, "I done that," adding that he electrocuted the fish with spirit energy. On the same day, Morris filled Janet's mouth with water and taped it shut, and then asked Bill to repeat phrases that are notoriously difficult for ventriloquists to say, like bottle of beer. According to the researchers, the water and tape didn't seem to affect the voice's clarity. On Christmas Day, the Hodgson family woke up to a loss. This time it was the family's pet Budgie that had passed during the night, but Bill didn't take responsibility this time. Later in the day, Janet was sitting by the living room window and one of the curtains wrapped itself around her neck. This wasn't an isolated incident. It happened a total of 8 times during the case. Sunday the 15th of January, on the evening of her mum's birthday, Margaret walked into the bathroom to find the word shit smeared on the wall in feces, while Peggy's birthday fright was an apparition which she spotted going upstairs. She said she saw a sort of apparition of the bottom half of a man's trousers, and as I went to look, I got a very quick glimpse and it faded completely. The trousers were of a type that my dad would have worn, the turnover style that they used to wear in about 1945. On Monday the 16th of January, another message was left in the bathroom. This time it was spelt out using strips of insulating tape that belonged to David Robertson. The tape was stuck to the back of the bathroom door and read, "I am Fred." Guy and Morris conclude that this couldn't have been faked by the girls, as the writing was made up of 20 individual pieces of tape and would have taken too long. On Thursday the 26th of January, BBC Radio 4's Rosalind returned to Green Street. This time she was able to make recordings of voices, which were now coming from Margaret too. Janet's older sister started speaking in a similar gruff voice to Janet's after Christmas. Margaret's version of the voice lacked the intensity and duration of Janet's. On Sunday the 12th of March, Stuart Lamont, a news broadcaster from BBC Scotland, visited the house twice. On his return visit, he interviewed the Hodgson family for a nationwide special. The crew captured footage during their time in the house which showed the poltergeist speaking through Janet.
Okay, we can play a bit of that.
Yeah.
We can play a bit of that. I'll just share the screen. Again, this type of stuff is massively, massively interesting.
How many voices are there?
600.
600 devices.
I know the joke.
How many really are there, Margaret?
I think so far we've had 10
Three.
sensible voices, but the rest of the names are absolute rubbish.
Spooky. Okay, Monday the 27th of March, Guy Leon Playfair consults Hans Bender. Again, another big name in paranormal circles. Hans Bender, a German parapsychologist with a history in research in poltergeist, met with Guy at the end of March. Hans recommended that Maurice and Guy should examine the family's psychological state and consider asking the Church of England to conduct an exorcism. I think I've just gone past one second.
There's Hans Bender there.
There we go. Sunday the 30th of April, Maurice and Guy gave the family some space throughout April, but left Peggy with instructions to make a note of any paranormal occurrences. When the paranormal investigators saw Peggy's diary, they were amazed to find that she had logged 155 incidents and that apparitions of human forms becoming more and more frequent. There had also been a worrying trend in the increase of incidents which involved small spontaneous outbreaks of fire. On Tuesday the 16th of May, famed American paranormal researcher Lorraine Warren wrote to Maurice on behalf of her and her demonologist husband Ed. In the letter, she said that she'd been following developments at the house and that she had hoped to visit but was not able to make it. However, Ed was planning on visiting the house in London in June. The couple eventually made 3 visits to the Hodgson home. On Tuesday the 16th of May, Enfield Investigation Committee is formed. The Society for Psychical Research formed a committee to look into the Enfield investigation. It consisted of Mary Rose Barrington, Hugh Pincott, Peter Halson and John Stiles. The committee were tasked with interviewing many of the witnesses and reviewing the testimonies collected by Maurice and his team. The committee concluded that there was some good evidence for genuine poltergeist activity. However, they reserved judgment on certain claims which weren't observed by credible witnesses. On Tuesday the 30th of May, Janet and Margaret were in the back garden arguing with the children next door when suddenly what appeared to be a handful of stones was thrown over the fence. Before the girls could retaliate, more stones were thrown from the other neighbouring garden. Within minutes, another neighbour showed up and he was angry and accusing someone of throwing stones at him. The girls had no idea where these stones and at one point even bricks or rocks had come from. On Friday the 16th of June, Ed and Lorraine Warren finally arrived in London, accompanied by a colleague. The couple interviewed the family, including John Burkham. That evening, the girls took part in a live transatlantic link with the WVAM, a radio station in Pennsylvania. The discussion was carried out over the phone, as the Hodgsons didn't have a phone in the house. It took place down the street in John's house. Shortly after the Warrens' visit, it was decided that Janet needed some time away from the house and she went to live in a home run by nuns. On Tuesday the 25th of July, Guy was able to arrange for Janet to be admitted to the Maudsley's Institute of Neuropsychology in South London. Guy stated in his book that this was the first time Janet had ever crossed the river into South London. While at the hospital, Janet underwent a series of physical and psychological tests to see if there was a medical or psychological explanation for what she'd been experiencing. On Saturday the 29th of July 1978, Guy and Rosalind visited Janet in hospital. Where she'd been there had been no unusual incidents at home and she seemed to be in good health. When asked why she thought the poltergeist had left her at Maudsley, Janet said, "The power can't build up because there's no one else to help build it up." On Friday the 1st September, almost 6 weeks away, Janet returned home after being recharged from Maudsley Hospital with a clean bill of health. With half an hour of a return, she saw a figure in the kitchen she described as being like a little boy. On Monday the 2nd of October, a friend of Guy's recommended a Dutch medium based in Amsterdam. Guy brought him over so he could put his healing skills to use in the house. Guy said he wasn't sure what Dono Gemelig Mailing could do. He couldn't speak any English. And what he actually did was perform nothing. There's no ceremony, no nothing. He just went up to the bedroom on his own, came down later and implied that was it. And Guy said after he left, things seemed to definitely calm down. On Monday the 20th of November 1978, despite the fact that the house had calmed down, one national newspaper ran a follow-up piece in November 1978, which started with the line, For more than a year now, strange and seemingly inexplicable events have been taking place in a house at Enfield in Middlesex. The family who live there and many other people besides believe that what is happening is being caused by a poltergeist. On Monday, the 6th of August 1979, almost a year after the activity began to decrease, Ed and Lorraine Warren paid Enfield another visit. During their 4 days in the house between the 6th and 9th of August, the Warrens and two colleagues recorded over 13 hours of audio and captured phenomena such as levitation of objects on camera. They also reported witnessing rocks appear from nowhere and even what they described as a spontaneous removal of the wallpaper in the kitchen. Monday the 1st of October, since Donno Glimieg Mailing's visit, poltergeist activity at 284 Green Street had died down, although there were still a few isolated incidents. But even these rare occurrences became even more infrequent after a priest came to bless the house in the autumn of 1979. Janet said that after the blessing, incidents quietened down but never stopped entirely while the family were living in the house. And that is the timeline of the Enfield Poltergeist.
Okay, well, the few things that were touched upon there, obviously some of the recordings, many recordings like made there. So we'll play another one or two of them and then bring Nodge in, see what his thoughts are about the audio quality and the capability of fakery, forgery, fraudulent type of activity going on with the recordings. So we had this Say My Name, the spirit of Bill Wilkins saying that he'd had a brain hemorrhage and passed away in the chair, and also this statement which I'm going to play now. If you just bear with me, this is because this was a strange comment to be made, certainly by a child, if one of the children's responsible for what was going on for throwing the voice. So I'll play this one.
Why can't Janet feel you?
I'm invisible.
You're invisible? Why are you invisible?
So my G hangs out as T.
So a strange one, and then another one. I mean, like I say, there were hours of this kind of thing that were recorded by several people.
Bill, if you're there, would you answer me the following question? What have you done with Denise's 30p?
Headed down to the radio, downstairs.
Sorry, Bill, can you say that again, please?
Headed down to the radio, downstairs.
Right, Bill, I'll go and look. Thanks so much. Bill, if you're there, would you answer me the following question? What have you done with Denise's 30p?
So, you know, a strange one. Another recording. I'll quickly play this one as well. So bring like I say, bring Nodge in and see what he thinks. Lots of audio from the location, many photographs, no video.
I can't remember exactly what happened.
What's that knocking?
Yeah, I can hear it now. I was doing that yesterday morning, and Peggy was on her own. So she came in to us, because it wasn't her, she came in. We sat together and we heard it. And I counted down knocks and there was 14 altogether.
So photographed a lot, lots of audio, and very, very little, if any, video, only when there's interviews being conducted, and then it picks up the noise of knocking in the background when they're interviewing the children. So the audio there, Nodge, the audio recordings of the of Bill Wilkins and of Stuart Certain, who was another character that was allegedly came through Janet. Was there was she did name a few. There was usually mainly three But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, given the limited amount of equipment and everything, the frequency response, what are your thoughts?
From what I've heard, I don't think that the technology really underpins the veracity of this case. You know far more about this than I do, but I think in this case that there's a plethora of sound recordings, as you say, and it's hard to know, isn't it? I mean, Steve and I spoke about this case before we came on air, and certainly, while there's a lot of retrospective sort of visuals and interviews, as you say, in terms of the sound recordings themselves, we don't know. I mean, there were a number of checks made to make sure that there was no ventriloquism and wires going on. So I don't think the technology involved either proves or disproves the case. I think it's an interesting case insofar that I don't know what the relative figures are, but I think more people experience this sort of poltergeist activity or disturbance, and maybe flying saucers. I don't know. My own mum was very interested in this stuff, and she knew Matthew Manning when she was younger, and she'd sort of experienced some of this stuff. So, I am interested in these kinds of cases, and this is, as you said at the beginning, Dave, this is certainly an index case of its type. I also used to work in London, and somebody actually alerted me to this case. We got chatting one day, and London is quite a spooky city in its own way, especially the old Roman parts that I used to work in, and bits of North London and so on. So I think in terms of the technology, there's certainly a lot of sound recordings, a lot of stills, but as you say, Dave, there's a lack of video, although there was some good work went on in terms of trying to analyze the voices and so on. I've got mixed feelings about this case, I must say.
As I've just put up a picture there, which is showing the waveform of the raps, recorded bangs, taken on investigations at Green Street. Now, the bottom waveforms that you're looking at are knocks that were performed by people. As a form of reference. Now, the top waveform is a bang that was allegedly caused by the poltergeist, and if you look at the duration of it in comparison to the waveform at the bottom, not only is the oscillations obviously suggesting a different frequency entirely, but the duration also is suggesting that it's reverberating more deeply and lasting longer than it should do. So as you look at that waveform, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it suggests something amiss, doesn't it, for sure?
It's certainly not the sort of signal that you would expect to see. Those, particularly the long waves, actually indicate a deep bass sound or a resounding sort of signal, whereas the upper waves are obviously, you're looking at a dispersed sort of reverberated pattern there, which would not be the sort of noise you would typically get in a house, I guess. But very interesting.
So, like a picture reflecting the wave patterns, the frequency responses taken in recordings of knocking, bangs, and taps that were very frequent at the Enfield case. Now, we mentioned levitation, so obviously the Enfield case is infamous for that, as is the seizures, if you like, the fits, the objects being thrown around. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't show some of that activity, and let's go with the levitation first. We'll put up some pictures of the levitation. Now, this has been massively called into question by many people that have seen this these photographs over the years, and I suppose it's understandable why. There's a very famous one where Janet's allegedly levitating. At first glance, it looks like she's jumping from the bed.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a chap you'll be familiar with, Dave, called Chris French, who is a psychology professor. He's a guy
absolutely
who studies anomalistic psychology, and one of the things that French has asserted was that while there may have been a sort of kernel of truth or something untowards at the beginning, he thinks that a lot of the the instances within the case, particularly the later occurrences, were actually pranks that got out of hand. So, what you may have had there was certainly paranormal activity to start with, and then maybe the assertion was that the girls actually just embellished that, but we'll never know, I guess.
We'll touch upon that actually, Nodge, in a little while, because that's a very good point. I mean, it's also been asserted that obviously because of the split up of the marriage and Peggy being a single mum, that Janet and Margaret missed the dad and sort of took a big shine to Maurice Grosse, liked the way he came across, respected him, enjoyed his company, and sort of started to look up to him almost as a father figure.
And the other thing to say, David, I'm not teaching Granny to suck eggs because I know you'll know this far better than me, but poltergeist activity is very often witnessed or visited upon disturbed adolescents in particular. And of course, Janet and the sister were prime candidates from that perspective, I would guess.
Also, Janet known for being bullied at school, which of course, given the events that were happening at home and people finding out about that because of media coverage, intensified that level of bullying, intensified. So very miserable. And would that amplify the amount of activity? Because as the activity happened, she became, and people became more aware of it. The media covered it. People at school would then make fun of her, because of it, which would then amplify the activity even more because she was more upset about it, and so on ad infinitum.
From what my mum told me about, I mean, my mum knew Matthew Manning and had discussions with him, and from her own sort of experiences, and from what he sort of told her, my understanding is that the more disturbed an individual becomes, almost the more likely that sort of activity is, because in essence the mind itself is generating or vibrating or even encouraging the spiritual activity around them.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is understandable. I mean, and upon analysis by a lot of people that have obviously tried to debunk it, there's lots of people have come forward to do that with varying levels of success. Ray Allen, like I say, ventriloquist, had visited the house and was pretty much convinced that the voices that were coming from Janet were just mimicry and clever vocal tricks.
Absolutely.
Which Maurice Grosse was having no part of. He didn't believe that. Due to explaining it as being the false vocal cords being responsible for making the sounds that they were hearing, the voice. Maurice Grosse would say that Janet's levitations were remarkable, and she would go from horizontal to vertical in a sixth of a second. And on analysis, that the voice was not made by the larynx or voice box, but by the vestibular or false vocal fold above the larynx. Which is, the people use it when they've lost the voice, and speaking like that for any length of time will damage the throat.
Yeah, that's right. So something that actors and singers are actually taught to try and use as well to project the voices, because very often we use our vocal cords without using the rest of our bodies. So it just, it is certainly the result of a different sort of vocal projection. Yeah.
And that Janet could do it for hours without feeling any kind of discomfort at all. So
yeah.
There you go. For those of you that are interested, true vocal folds, false vocal folds, the epiglottis, and various other nice bits and bats. It looks like something off Star Trek, maybe that. So the voices. It is now the right time to start picking apart this case. It is now the time to show a little bit more evidence. I mean, I suppose we could show pictures of the actual evidence, if you like. Should we show pictures of the evidence, or should we start picking holes in it and going through what people have said?
Whichever way you want to go, mate.
Whichever you think. I mean, I'm particularly interested by what Steve was telling us about Milbourne Christopher. Very often, a bit like Darren Brown is always able to sort of unpick hoaxy behaviour, because quite frankly he knows exactly what's involved. I was very interested in Milbourne Christopher's response to the girls after he visited, because obviously he was a conjurer who knew a thing or two about falsifying evidence and you know, the misleading the eye and all that sort of stuff. And it seems to me you've got a very decent and serious researcher like Maurice Grosse, and then you've got this chap, and you have the two demonologists. Sorry, I've forgotten the names, but the demonologists who visited, who obviously had very good intentions, but they all came to it from a different perspective. I think some of them would have been more inclined to believe the girls, and some of them would have been more inclined to step back and say, is what we're seeing real, or is it the product of a hoax?
Yeah, you're referring to Ed and Lorraine Warren from the States.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nowhere near as much to do with the case as certain films would have many people believing.
Right.
That's by a slideshow of some of the photographs that were taken of the of destruction caused around the property by the poltergeist, throwing chairs, settees, sofas, that kind of thing. Which obviously is going to require a certain amount of energy lodged up against the wall. I think Guy Playfair was in the kitchen, had heard a noise in the front room, and upon returning into the living room had found this sofa pushed up against the wall on an angle like that. The fire coming off the wall. Burning out of control. We had flying teapots as well. There was an infamous flying teapot that were floating around the kitchen. And clatters. Now, a lot of this activity is happening in full view of witnesses. People are seeing this firsthand. They're seeing the objects move, just like WPC Caroline Heaps did when she first went round to investigate the property. There's the teapot there. Now, people are seeing these moving around. Now, as much as you debunk the activity of Janet and Margaret Hodgson, the fact that these objects are levitating in full view of multiple witnesses, more than 30 witnesses were privy to seeing, like there, a table in the kitchen going over. They were seeing this firsthand on more than one occasion. Now, this was an experiment where Maurice Grosse had mentioned the flower pots, and then come back into the kitchen, and they'd all been lined up in a row while he'd been away, as had the teacups, like you see in the picture there. Bed frame thrown down the stairs.
Yeah.
Obviously requiring a certain amount of force to be able to do that. So there were lots of pictures of this ilk. That particular chair there was known for being thrown around a great deal. In the chair that was in between the girls' beds. Chest of drawers there. I think actually that had been thrown at Peggy at some stage as well. I think Janet made that statement when she was being interviewed, and that a cupboard had been thrown at Peggy, and maybe a chest of drawers had been thrown at Margaret. And more upheaval there.
These are all stills, aren't they? I mean, there was no video at the time taken, was there, in real time?
That's the big shame of it, though, isn't it? I mean, if it was like in this day and age where we have like camera in our hands all the time, if we could have caught any images, that would have been proof perfect.
Yeah.
Guy Playfair there went upstairs because he heard a massive noise. Like I said, there's the I Am Fred made out of the tape that David Robertson had misplaced, or had it been taken from him. It turned up a few days later, and that was the message that was on the bathroom door. Now, that happened a lot, although to be fair, the investigators had seen Janet trying to bend spoons and Margaret, and they'd been caught doing it, trying to do that. Now, whether they were trying to mimic activity that had already taken place or not is open for conjecture.
The period of Uri Geller as well, of course, wasn't it?
Hadn't David Roberts, though, actually took him somewhere to do a little experiment with her where she had a metal bar, and within half an hour or something, at first she couldn't do anything with it, and then when she started concentrating on it, it did actually bend a bar, so it was concave. She hadn't touched it.
Actually, Guy Playfair caught her trying to bend a bar at the top of the landing.
Yeah, this was done away from the house. It was actually done in a scientific establishment in a room with David Roberts sat in there watching her, and she just sat with this rod on the table, and she wasn't allowed to touch it. She had to look at it, and he could see the bar begin to bend.
However, she had been caught bending spoons fraudulently and trying to bend a bar despite that experiment. She had been caught doing it, trying to fake evidence.
Right, but if there's somebody there witnessing it, is that still a fake, even though it happens in front of their eyes?
Well, that's the thing, innit? When it comes to things like that, you've got there's lots of eminent parapsychologists that are around. You know, and one of the biggest one is Kieran O'Keefe, well known because of various things. And it's a shame, really, because if you it's one of them. If you fake evidence, it calls to question all the real evidence. That is always going to be the case. If any kind of evidence is faked, then the real evidence also becomes under more scrutiny than maybe it would have done otherwise.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
It discredits all of it, sort of thing, Dave.
Say again, sorry, sir.
It discredits all of it if once you've had one bad occurrence, sort of thing.
So that's like some of the activity that were going on there. We'd seen the drawings, we'd seen the levitation, other ones where they've been pulled from the bed. Now, various statements have been made by, again, like say, various people about what had gone on. Joe Nickel was a very outspoken critic and skeptic of anything paranormal back in them days. He was known for debunking the Brown Lady photograph and many more. And he looked at what the paranormal investigators had put forward and pretty much like ripped him for being just like overly credulous. And especially when like demonic voices were being heard, and it would say that, as always, Janet Lips hardly seemed to be moving, and Playfair would defend any of the voices that came out of Janet because Janet's lips hardly seemed to be moving. But when Ray Allen, the ventriloquist, visited the house and heard the voices that were coming from Janet, he put it down to mimicry and just clever vocal tricks. Again, you got Maurice Grosse defending the facts of the false vocal folds and not the larynx being used. They had a remote controlled still camera, and the photographer wasn't present now. So in the great many of the pictures where you're seeing Janet levitating, the photographer's not in the room when that's happening. This is it's time to take a picture every 15 seconds, and that was investigator Melvin Harris set that up, and this caught them pranking. The girls were pranked doing that. He said that some of a lot of the photos, in his opinion, like prove the fact that Janet wasn't actually levitating; she was just bouncing off the bed as if it was a trampoline, and that's what they're saying. And he called it gymnastics. And Janet Hodgson was actually well known at school for being a sports champion. Yeah. And Nickel also said that the malfunctions that the tape recorders were experiencing were that Grosse was putting down to being paranormal activity.
Just jamming.
And David Fontana, was that David Fontana had said that it appeared to defy the laws of mechanics. Was a peculiar threading jam that occurred with that older model reel-to-reel recorder, which I shown a picture of earlier. And that even Ed Warren, when he was there, he was exaggerating the cases and making up incidents, transforming hauntings into like demonic possessions to suit his narrative.
Although I think it must be said, Dave, that you, Steve, and I have all used reel-to-reel tape recorders, and we know that one thing they are exceedingly good at is jamming.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is an infamous case for many reasons. It's, Janet had been multiple times detected using trickery. A video camera, apparently, and this is what gets me now. A video camera is allegedly caught her bending spoons. Now, that video footage you can't find. Now, is that because it's not evidence? It's evidence of fraud. But a video camera in the room next door caught bending spoons and attempting to bend an iron bar. This was caught on video, apparently. Now, Grosse had seen Janet banging a broom handle on the ceiling. It saw her hiding his tape recorder at one point, trying to hide his tape recorder. And the voice that Bill, that came out of Janet, had a habit of changing the topic midway through the conversation, which is the same kind of habit that Janet had herself.
Yeah.
She would change topic during conversation when she was acting as herself. And even Janet and Margaret sort of admitted to pranking to journalists to the extent where, like, Maurice Grosse and Guy Playfair was almost begging the girls to retract the confession. And they were generally for a certain amount of time sort of not looked down upon, but sort of ridiculed by the contemporaries for being easily duped. And Douglas Bence, one of the original reporters that went there with Graham Morris, like on one evening, him and Maurice Grosse were heard on the landing, stood on the landing and heard moaning coming from the bedroom. And Morris got excited, thinking it was paranormal phenomena, but like Bence knew that the sound was one of the girls was masturbating, and that's what was causing the moans. Again, a lot of people put it down to that the activity that was going on. It was all a claim, so that Peggy could be rehomed. She could be put in a better house, get out of there. But even Doug Bence, again, Daily Mirror reporter, says that he doesn't believe that that's the case at all. Guy Fairway said that he even asked Peggy if she wanted to escape the poltergeist by getting a new house. And she said, this is my home, so no way. In fact, she stayed there until she died in 2003. So multiple opportunities to go leave the house, the memory of the house, even after the poltergeist activity has stopped. The memory of what went on there could be enough for people that had gone through that to still want to leave, even though the activity had actually died down. Yeah. Both Margaret and Peggy were known to have played pranks during the investigation, like I said. But when they did admit this, they also said that they always got caught out by Maurice Grosse or Guy Fairway when they tried to do so. As I said before, Janet got caught trying to hide Maurice Grosse's tape recorder and being caught bending spoons and banging on the ceiling. So you can allude to the fact that that statement must hold some kind of water. Guy Fairway said that all it proved that they were trying to mimic phenomena that they'd experienced and not what they had previous knowledge of. So far as to say that what they were trying to do is recreate events that they'd been witness to, not try to portray phenomena that they had previous knowledge of until the event happened as a real event, if that makes any sense, if you know where I'm coming from. And that the events when the girls were not mimicking were completely genuine. And, it has to be remembered that they were observed by multiple witnesses and, as such, stand in their own right as evidence because of that. And it's like I said, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that evidence of fraud weakens the real evidence. And that's the issue with it.
Yeah.
Maurice Grosse, again, criticized for wanting to believe too readily and easily. And that he would too easily accept phenomena as being genuine that he didn't personally see. So one of the family members could say such and such a thing had happened, and even if Maurice Grosse had not seen it, he would absolutely take it on board as being absolute concrete evidence because word of mouth was good enough. And he would put everything that he experienced himself down to being paranormal. Like I say, he'd take the word of family members when he was told of events. And he'd had a bereavement the year before.
He was very strongly motivated, wasn't he, because of his daughter, wasn't it? It's a tragedy. And he obviously wanted desperately to truly believe that there was a bridge there between our world and the next, maybe.
And you see that in more modern times with people like Gary Galka, who's invented the Mel meter and so on and so forth, because his daughter died in an automobile accident. And a lot of people have said that influenced, that massively influenced his approach to the case. But other people have completely defended him by saying that he never lost objectivity to it. He always looked at it as being a poltergeist case or telekinesis, and he wasn't using it as a means of coming to terms with the loss of his daughter Janet the year before. Margaret and Janet, in an interview in 1978, it was recorded in 1978, but it was aired in 1980 as a special, I believe. And Janet is asked how it feels to be haunted by a poltergeist, and she says it's not haunted. And smiles as she says it. Now, Margaret smiles like shocked at it, Apparently, this is the way that it's worded, as if Janet just gave up a secret and whispers "shut up" through muted giggles. Janet later said she didn't feel that the poltergeist was evil, meaning that the house wasn't necessarily haunted. Maybe because that's the guy. I don't know. Again, 2 experts from the SPR caught the children bending spoons. So you've got multiple people that have caught them doing it. You've got Guy Playfair. You've got Graham Morris has caught them doing it. 2 other people from the SPR have caught them doing it. Society for Psychical Research, just in case anybody's interested. And they've been caught bending the spoons. They also found it strange why no one was allowed in the room when Janet was talking in the possessed voices. There's limited evidence to suggest that's completely true, given the fact that, what was the name of Maurice Gross's son? Is it Christopher Richard?
Just one sec. I'll just go back through my notes for you.
Believe it might be Richard.
Bloody hell.
Who was like you say, he was a
solicitor, wasn't he?
Solicitor, yeah. He's heard on the recording, obviously, in the same room. It is Richard, yeah, Richard. He's heard in the same room, actually prompting the questions when the voice that is allegedly Bill Wilkins said that he had a brain hemorrhage and passed away in the chair. So there's lots of contradicting stories just because of that alone. Janet herself has admitted that a lot of the Enfield art events were complete, they fabricated them, but then she said we only faked 1 or 2 things just to see if, Maurice Gross and Guy Playfair would catch them, and they always did.
Yeah.
In an article that came out just before the release of The Conjuring 2, and stress that anybody who's watched The Conjuring 2, don't use that as a yardstick for the events that happened at 284 Green Street, because for obvious reasons, that's Hollywood doing its versions of it. And she said that just 2% of the paranormal activity in Green Street had actually been faked. The rest of it allegedly being real.
Now, one of the things that Chris French said was that Bill, the old man who possessed Janet, was obsessed with periods. French's phrase quote was saying, when Janet was supposedly possessed by the spirit of the old man, he took a lot of interest in menstruation. That's not something you would expect an old man to be interested in.
I believe Janet had her first period at the end of 1977, was it? I think she started menstruating then during an actual investigation.
And the question was, I guess, that Chris French was asking was, well, why would there be a correlation between what an old man would actually say to Janet and her sort of personal circumstances, sort of thing? But interesting.
Okay, well, a couple of parapsychologists and they're also I want to use the term I want to be politically correct with this one, but we'll say wannabe physicists, Brevetto and Maxia. I've got an hypothesis that the changes in the brain that occur during puberty involve fluctuations in electron activity that in rare cases can create disturbances up to a few meters around the outside of the brain. Okay, now this one will be a one for you here, Nudge. These disturbances would be similar in character to the quantum mechanical fluctuations that physicists believe occur in a vacuum, in which virtual particle and antiparticle pairs pop up for a fleeting moment before they annihilate each other and disappear again. They also believe that the extra fluctuations triggered by the pubescent brain would substantially enhance the presence of the virtual particles surrounding the person, and this could slowly increase the pressure of air around them, moving objects, and even sending them hurtling across the room.
I think the problem we're trying to draw parallels with physical processes, particularly something as esoteric as virtual particles, which exist for sort of like a trillionth of a second before they're cancelled out by each other and require an extremely sensitive and large hadron collider to detect, is that you need to be able to replicate your results, and very often that's not possible. So the question is, why wouldn't you be able to replicate those results in any number of scenarios? But whenever I see any questionable science, it always has the word quantum attached to it, because not even physicists fully understand what quantum science actually implies and means. So I'm always nervous when I see the word quantum in something.
Yeah, in a way, it's like a get out word to explain we don't really know.
Yes, yeah, and it's also a question of, add a zero, because you can do whatever the hell you like with quantum theory. It is dealing with such small units of energy and such small units of space. I mean, down to fermions, and one of the theories is that quantum particles actually exist in microscopic additional dimensions below the macroscopic world, so that it's very, very hard to prove or to replicate the results. So I think it's exceedingly spurious when I see scientific evidence accompanied by the word quantum, specifically when it's actually connected with anything biological, because, well, there are quantum mechanisms within the body, and particularly with regard to the way the nervous system works, it's very hard to measure additional energy fluctuations around the body. Unlike the Matrix, the human body doesn't actually generate that much energy.
Mm-hmm. Of course, and Steve made an interesting point earlier, which I'll go over some of the reasons for that in a minute, and then we can back it back to Steve. It was the actual experiences that the paranormal investigators had while they were there, the events that they witnessed, beg your pardon, is well known, but some of them are not quite as well known, and that's regarding the equipment. Yeah. And on multiple occasions, this isn't just Graham Morris, this is Douglas Benson and other people that visited the property, Rosalind Morris as well. It was that tripods wouldn't stand up, and tape recorders would malfunction or refuse to work. Remote controlled cameras and video cameras would fail. Batteries would be drained. Tapes would be wiped or blanked, which is why they didn't get the video footage. And bulbs would shatter and explode. They would see Janet levitate themselves. They're seeing this themselves. They're seeing Janet levitate. So the photographs before where it looks like she's leaping, whilst that might be the case at first hand or on first analysis, multiple witnesses actually saw Janet levitate. They would find furniture upturned or thrown across a room. They would see objects float in the air. They would see the cutlery being bent when nobody was touching it. Again, Janet being seen or found to be trying to bend spoons. Was she mimicking phenomena that she'd witnessed, which is what Guy Playfair said? Plant pots being lined up neatly on the kitchen floor. Cardboard boxes were thrown at Maurice Grosse. We heard that he got hit by a cardboard box with the cushion in it right at the beginning of the video that we've done tonight. Excuse me. Tapping on the walls during interviews. Again, we heard that. Growls being heard by multiple witnesses. Pools of water appearing in the middle of the floor. Matches self-igniting. Thrown objects would be hot to the touch when they were picked up. Marbles, when they were dropped to the floor, wouldn't bounce. They'd just stay completely still, as if they'd landed in mud of something like that, I suppose. Curtains would appear to blow in the wind even when the windows were closed shut. Multiple witnesses testified that knocking would be heard when the children could be seen and everyone was present. So they're still hearing knocking, they're still hearing banging, tapping, rasping, scraping, noises like that. When the children are in the room with them, they can see everybody else that's in the house. They're all in the same room, but they're still hearing this banging. Drawers would open on their own in full view. Graham Morris he had multiple flash guns. You know this as a photographer. I'm a photographer too. Yep. Your flash guns. It's a cardinal sin to go out without your batteries fully charged. As a paranormal investigator, it's the same as you can attest to. They will be fully drained. These will be fully charged. These nudge. The fully charged flash guns, and of course, it is a different animal. The flash guns back in those days compared to what you're using now, but fully drained, not work. The actual Society of Psychical Research tried to use video recorders, apparently with infrared filters, to record at night. But when they tried to turn it on, just all the lights would flash, but it wouldn't record. It wouldn't work. But all the lights would flash. The LEDs that you get above the play button, the rewind, the fast forward, that kind of thing. All those lights would flash, but it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. I mean, the sheer amount of problems with the video cameras meant that the footage of the Enfield Poltergeist was pretty much not captured. Just the bits that we're seeing, where you little bits of audio, the knocking that comes through when they're being interviewed, when they. So that's sort of the reason why the lack of video footage isn't because they didn't try to get it. Of course, they did try to get video footage. It's just that every time they tried to time they tried to use video cameras, that kind of phenomenon was happening to them. The batteries were getting drained, the cameras getting smashed.
Something I'd like to ask you and Steve, and it's something that my mum mentioned to me, because she sort of experienced this as a teenager on nowhere near this level. It was with a clock, actually, that broke on a particular day, and after that the activity stopped. And that's when Mailing went to the house, and he went upstairs by himself, everything calmed down. And in your experience, or from your knowledge of the subject, is that sort of typical? Does it sort of suddenly stop and then that's it? I know that the house had always carried on having some sort of activity, but after that, it was a lot. After October '79, it was a lot quieter, wasn't it?
Steve, do you want to take this, and then I'll pick up after you?
I mean, in my experience, I've often found, excuse me, that there is a point where it no longer carries on. I believe in the theory of starving the phenomena. If you get people out of the house, then it tends to die off. When the people start going back in, the energy's there to feed off. And like you said, if somebody goes upstairs, I mean, I know it sounds daft and people sort of scoff, and for many years, like I said to you earlier on, I've been looked at a weirdo most of my life. But there are people who sort of say, we'll perform a spirit rescue, and they go up and they say a couple of prayers, they say this, that, and the other, and basically after that, it's been fine. In 1983, I was involved in a case which literally was it was the juncture of three neighbourhoods of Cheetham Hill, of Collyhurst, and of Crumsell. And
these are areas of Manchester for people who are not from Manchester, by the way. That's right, Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to go into that and say it's the three boroughs of the Manchester area in North Manchester. And it was two girls who allegedly had started using a Ouija board in the house and all sorts of that. And I kid you not, witnessed it myself. There was books being flung around. These two girls, and at one point they said, "You need to duck now." And there's me and two other guys who were there. He said, "What do you mean?" And these girls launched under the table, and it looked like everything around the room that wasn't fastened down just hurtled towards this table where the two girls were. Now, there was a gentleman, like I say, it was myself and two of the lads there, and one of these lads said, "Right, I know somebody who can perhaps help here." A few phone calls were made over the coming days, because in days no phone call, no mobiles or anything like that. And basically, this guy came to the house and he wandered round and he was saying, like, I don't even know how you would put it. I wouldn't say they were prayers. It was more like an affirmation, of like how good people were, and that they didn't need to be there, and that there's a better life for them elsewhere beyond the life that they're living now. And literally overnight, everything stopped. So there is something which does create that end point to something. I don't exactly know what. It's interesting to try and find out. But
it was like an underlying event, that wasn't it? From what you said, that seemed to be the end of it.
Yeah, it's as though the positive energy comes in and takes away. I mean, don't get me wrong. Over the years, I've investigated a lot. I've seen floating cats. I've seen people as an investigator who stood there, opened the window, and been smacked in the face by something, so much so that they've had the nose broken. I mean, to paraphrase Winston Zeddemore, I've seen stuff that'll turn your hair white, literally. But more often than not, it does have a tendency to die off. So what is it? Is whatever is causing this? Does the energy what creates it, does that dissipate over a period of time so that there's nothing there to actually activate, carry it on, or whatever? Or is it a case of that it is a spirit that is lost? And if that is the case, that somebody comes in with some positive energy, enough energy perhaps to shunt them over to the other side and to the place where they need to go? I don't know. All I know is stuff that I've witnessed. I can't explain it. I wish I could. And it's like Dave was saying earlier on, that people have seen this, they've seen that, and people saying, oh, that's, that can't be true. That's got to be a hoax, this, that, and the other. All I can say is sometimes is, especially like in the early 80s when we didn't have the, like the top of the range video cameras or phones and stuff like that. Sometimes you had to be there to witness what was going on. And yeah, you're going to get like, oh, well, that's rubbish that, you've got no proof, you've got no evidence. But sometimes you've got to be there to see it.
Yeah, interesting. What fascinates me is there was such a lot of activity, and then suddenly mailing comes along, and peace descends. I know the house was never quite peaceful, but after that, everything dies down, and some degree of normality returns. And from what Dave was saying about the fact that obviously technology and so on was affected by this, I'm interested to think, is there any correlation between that and what was going on? But
okay, well, the legacy of this, and I will quickly flip over to see what's going on in the chat. Right, okay, well, yeah, okay, can see that the answer to that is, if we respond to every single statement or thing we see in the chat, we get pulled off where we're going, but we come to the chat towards the end and we'll go through any of your questions or anything you want us to do there. So that's the reason why. There's a lot to get through, and we need to do it. So bear with me, and we'll fly into the chat and see what you guys have said and take it from there. Now, Margaret and Janet had played with the Ouija board before the activity began. Janet has pretty much said that. So it was that a catalyst for activity. Either way, they'd played with the Ouija board, according to Janet. Now, a couple of statements made by Janet. Now, this is easy to find all over the internet. There's no lack of footage of, not as quite as much from Margaret, it has to be said. But Janet certainly, she says that when she was seen by Hazel, the lollipop lady, that the lady saw me spinning around and banging against the window. I thought I might actually break the window and go through it. She's made statements like, it lived off me, off my energy. Call me mad if you like. Those events did happen. The poltergeist was with me, and I feel that in a sense he always will be. Another statement was, I felt used by a force that nobody understands. I really don't like to think about it too much. I'm not sure the poltergeist was truly evil, which reflects her comment when the video was aired in 1980 that she said it wasn't haunted because she didn't think the poltergeist was evil. It was almost as if it wanted to be a part of our family. It didn't want to hurt us. It had died there and wanted to be at rest. The only way it could communicate was through me and my sister. Margaret had said, we were all in a terrible state, very scared and tired of it, and it got worse as the time went on. Janet would say, I was used and abused. There was levitation, there were the voices, and there was the curtain that wrapped itself around my neck, which was quite life-threatening for me, and it brought it home to me that this could kill you. Now, Ed Warren had made a comment, a statement, as he was wont to do as a self-professed demonologist. Inhuman spirit phenomena were in progress. Now, you couldn't record the dangerous, threatening atmosphere inside that little house, but you could film the levitations, teleportations, and dematerializations of people and objects that were happening there, not to mention the many hundreds of hours of tape recordings made of these spirit voices speaking out loud in the rooms. Now, as far as the legacy goes regarding Bill Wilkins, now I haven't looked too much into this, I have to admit, but allegedly Bill Wilkins had a son called Terry Wilkins, who confirmed that his father had died of a brain hemorrhage and passed away in a chair downstairs, which is exactly as Janet had described. So you read into that what you will regarding the claims that Janet was making when she was speaking as Bill. Janet's put the visit by the priest as being what caused it to calm down. We all know it's got probably more to do to Domo Miling. However, they didn't end completely. Peggy still heard noises in the house every now and then, as did the younger brother Billy, and he'd lived there with his mum until his mum passed away, like I said, in 2003. And he would say that you always felt like you were being watched. And even at the height of it, just after the events subsided and the press attention faded, the family was still up against it. I mean, Janet married pretty young after leaving home at 16. Johnny Hodgson died of cancer at age 14. And the family claimed that something paranormal happened in that house all the way up until Peggy died. And at that time, that's when Billy moved out of the house. Janet herself lost a child. She had a son who died in his sleep when he was 18 years old. She says that as far as talking about it, is she doesn't want to like resurrect painful memories of the Enfield Poltergeist events when her mother was alive. But now that her mother's passed on, she's ready to tell a story. Okay, and I suppose the last thing before we fly into what people have got to say in the chat is after Peggy passed away, Claire Bennett and 4 sons moved in to 284. Okay. And like Janet's, like Billy Hodgson, Claire claimed that she always felt as if she was being watched. There was always somebody watching her. And during the night, her children would get woken up by voices coming from downstairs. They would hear voices coming, the bedroom door open, floating up the stairs. They would hear voices coming from downstairs. She then learned about the Enfield Poltergeist that had allegedly haunted the house. And the final straw came when her son Shaka, he was 15, woke up and saw a man enter his bedroom, and they moved out the next day after being in the house for only 2 months. So there you go. Let's have a look in the chat. Where are we up to in the chat? Okay. Okay, any comments? Let's have a look. I'll go back here. Please put the picture. Which pictures are you referring to, stranger? Of the levitating? You want me to put the pictures back up of the levitation? Is that what you're saying, stranger? Yes. Okay, I see you there. Yes, I will. Pictures of the girls levitating coming right up, sir. Individually mic'd up keys on that there. There's one. Of course, in the foreground there, you can see Peggy. And of course, Starsky and Hutch on the wall there. Mr. Glazer and
David Soul.
Mr. Soul. Okay,
Yeah.
there's one.
You're singing detective.
Yeah, I wonder if that was before or after Silver Lady.
As you look at that, that picture does look like she is leaping. I will show some pictures of the responses of people that were at the investigation, their reactions to phenomena that are going on. And they, to be fair, like I say, I'll play them in a minute. They do look like they're scared of what's going on. A couple more for you here, Stranger Times. Bear with me, please. There's another one there. Seeing various artists in the background there, Bay City Rollers, so on and so forth.
The little girl in the background, she's not exactly enamoured on what's going on this year.
No.
And that's exactly it. As he alluded to a moment ago, some of the pictures of the reactions of the people seeing the phenomena sort of suggest that they're far from happy about what they're witnessing.
Yeah.
As you look at that with her arms outstretched, knees bent, heels brought up towards her backside, it does look like she's leaping. Although Maurice Groves would say that she would go from being horizontal to vertical within 1/6 of a second. And are we capturing that as she's in the vertical phase, as it were? Bear with me, stranger. I've got more for you. Actually, that's more of a landing photo. There is a GIF. I did download a GIF of these photos in sequence, And when you see them in sequence, it just looks to me like she's jumping off the bed. I have to be honest. However, it does have to be said that if you look in the background now, you can see that the bed's got Margaret in it, and I presume that's Billy.
Yeah.
And the photo before didn't, so that would call the GIF into question that it had been made to make it look like she was leaping off the bed.
Yeah, it's definitely a different set of pictures, that.
It is.
And there's also one earlier on that you showed with the mum sat there watching it. I'm sure that she would have turned around and said, "Oh, what are you jumping out of the bed for?"
Yeah. There was a reunion as well, wasn't there? The girls got together on the BBC, and I know that they sort of brought some of the photographs out. But as you say, Steve, you know, there's a distinctly different set of images often used, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes some images are. It's like with a lot of haunting stuff and even UFO stuff. It's the case of they'll bring out a specific image and go, "Look at this."
Yeah.
Doesn't that make a travesty of what you've just seen?
Absolutely.
Right, as far as I know, Mags, no, there were no reports of her ever injuring herself when she was allegedly thrown across the room and pulled out of the bed, or when she levitated or floated around the bedroom. No reports of her injuring herself at all. And is that because she knew how to land because she was doing gymnastics at school and had won awards? Maybe.
You could also say that if she was actually at the times when she was under the influence of, you know, the sedatives, or she was actually still fast asleep, the body itself in situations like that does have a tendency to it allows you to have, I mean, when you have operations and, you know, you sparked out, they literally throw you around in these surgical theatres and stuff like that, but you don't feel it because your body sort of can accept it, if you understand what I mean, when you're in that kind of situation.
As far as I'm aware, the sedation happened just on one particular day because she'd had a seizure type fit. She then started to have a lot of seizures after that, which weren't really covered in the timeline, but I've got some pictures of that where she started to have a lot of seizures where various family members and neighbours and obviously investigators would have to hold her down onto the bed as she was throwing herself all around the place, or in the throes of being possessed and being thrown all around the place. I've got, and where she was on the radio, she was found in the corner on top of the radio by John Burkham and Graham Morris, as you said in the timeline there, which for some reason I'm struggling to find. I do have a picture of that though. Bear with me. If anybody can, if you, either of you guys can just keep a little bit of an eye in the chat there, just so. There is a picture that does.
Yeah, I think we discussed it the other day because we'd actually seen that one. It's the one where she's literally in that strange position over in the corner of the room, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. The levitation photos, them, I mean, they sort of like give the flavor of all the rest of the type of levitation photos that you're likely to see. So we could put up many dozens of pictures where she's allegedly levitating, but it won't change the way, you know, they're all of a similar vein. Yeah, I will show these though. There you go. I'll read the chat in a second, guys, and get back to you if there's something in the chat regarding something you might want to see. Okay, so let's go there. During one of her seizures, or Maurice Gross obviously trying to keep control of her, or rather trying to prevent her from hurting herself, I suppose. Again, during this time, never. What?
I'm saying that's probably more like it preventing her from hurting herself.
Never known to ever hurt herself, never known to sustain any injuries that I'm aware of, any of them, apart from other people. Indeed, Vic Nottingham also got hit by a Lego brick on the elbow on the following night after he'd gone on the first night when Peggy had gone next door, because of the chest of drawers moving into the room and her trying to put it back into place. He'd gone around, like you say, he was a builder, so he'd done a look around to thought that it might have been structurally unsound, which is what was causing the furniture to move. And he went back the following day, and he was another witness seeing the Lego bricks that were just floating around.
And all the knockings, of course, as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, all the knock-ins, of which there were plenty of them. This is a famous picture, so I'll put this up because I'd be remiss if I didn't. Really, I think. Here we go. Well-known photo, famous photo of the Enfield Poltergeist case. Again, Maurice Gross there, looking after Janet whilst having one of her seizures. Okay, what have we got? Right side, troll looking down. I don't even know what that's about. Let's have a look. Set to very high. Yes, Valium's been used a lot. It's a decent anxiolytic as well. It's, you wouldn't expect it. 10 milligrams she had apparently. Given her age, size, the rest of it, you would expect that to have been, that to have been rare, pretty effective.
Yeah.
An 11-year-old girl. She may have been 12 when she took that, but even so, a young girl. You wouldn't expect her to be.
Well, she's not going to get up playing netball, is she? After that.
Yeah, well, she's certainly not going to climb it and stick herself into the corner of the room on top of the radio. I'm struggling to find that image. Anyway, it exists. I'll find it in a second when I'm not looking for it, no doubt. So quickly go back into the chat. Where are we up to? Yes, there you go, Stranger Times. That's a good prompt for me to bring in the reactions of people. I've got messages coming in from all over the place while I'm trying to stream. So the reactions of some of the people that were there, whichever way you marry it up, it's a very, very strange case, isn't it? You know, I mean, the people involved that are still around to talk about what went on, just there's no, you know, yes, they'd said that they'd made things happen, they'd said that they'd done a little bit of fraudulent stuff, they'd faked a few things, but you know, in their eyes, still completely valid.
It's an underlying something, and that's the main thing. It's the crux of the matter.
Okay, here's the reactions of some of the people that were there. Tell me what you think, everybody. I'll pause on that for a sec. Now, if you look at that, you've got Billy, you've got Janet in the middle, and Margaret on the right. Now, Billy looks a little bit like he can't believe what he's seeing. Margaret looks scared out of her wits, really, like she's about to burst into tears. And Janet looks mesmerized, excited by it, in wonderment of it. A completely different reaction than her siblings, it has to be said. I don't know what other people's thoughts have on that. Let's have a look at the other one. It's definitely a strange case, isn't it?
Cheers.
Okay, so I'll continue to press play. Okay, like I say, it almost seems at first glance that Janet's reaction doesn't match up with the reaction of her siblings. Okay, that's a photograph taken of Margaret. I would say that she doesn't look massively impressed. And again, she also looks in distress there.
Yeah, it certainly don't look like the face of somebody who's, well, she'd have to be a bloody damn good actor, put it that way.
Yeah, very interesting that. Okay, the rear right there, that looks to be Peggy Nottingham. In the foreground, of course, we've got Peggy Hodgson. And that might have been David in the background there. Again, sorry, Now, again, that looks like Billy on the left-hand side. Peggy, who doesn't look like she's impressed. You can see that Billy's mouth's open. He's at least astonished at what he's looking at. Peggy is looking like it's in disbelief. Over the shoulder in between Peggy and the elderly neighbour there, you can see Janet. Again, a different kind of reaction. It's difficult to tell because they've stuck one of them SAS bars over her eyes. But as you look at the elderly gentleman there, again, he also looks like he's not massively impressed with what he's seeing either. Yeah. So there's just a couple of pictures of the responses from people that were there. Yeah, she was tested psychologically on more than one occasion, and psychologically come back as being completely sound. Despite make what bigger, Paranormal Chapel? The girl in the back. Yeah, I could zoom in on that. Although, like I say, she's got the SAS bar over her eyes. But I can do that. He's looking in the direction of the camera. I don't think he's looking at the camera. And I'm sure he's seen a camera before. Although I suppose you never know, do you? You never know. Where are we? Responses. There's not that many folders. You see, the episodes when she would have them were described as trance fits. Here we go. Okay, so let's what we're zooming in on now. We're zooming in on. Okay, let's have a look at them. Yeah. Try and zoom in a little bit more. Okay, I'm not sure. It's going to be pretty grainy, but I'll share that. There we go. I take it that's the photo you mean. Yeah, it does look like he's looking at the camera. I'm wondering if he's looking at the camera as if to say, are you capturing this? Or rather, why are you photographing us instead of what's going on, you know? That to me looks like Janet in the background. Like I say, she's got one of them bars that cover up Special Forces guys' eyes.
Looks like an 80s album cover of some weird sort of like electronica band.
I don't know. Or the Smiths.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Almost a smile, yeah. No, 1970s, fairly personality disorder still pretty much in its infancy. Would follow certain triggers though at the start. There would be, when it comes to diagnosis, there would be like related to via triggers, and taken away from the environment, she would act completely normally, and even in later life, it's not like she was cured from it. Nervous grin, yeah, probably a nervous grimace could be. She looks like she done a lot of nervous grimaces though. I suppose you could say that, but I do see what you're saying. Yeah, do see what you're saying with that. She looks like she's smiling to me. That's the impression I get. Is on a lot of the photographs. She's got a completely different attitude than the rest of the family. There is a photo where she's playing pranks, because it would be remarked upon that she was actually a very, very normal child, very playful, very loving child. Yeah, there we go. I found it. I'll share this with everybody. See what you think.
I was just thinking that if we could sort of posit something in a different way, you know, like you're saying, like she's smiling. But what if it was a case of like she'd sort of been witness to these things for years before it became more knowledgeable to the rest of the members of the household, and she'd sort of become a little bit more acclimatized to it than everybody else.
But there's no evidence to suggest that anything happened other than at the beginning of August, knocks and bangs that Peggy heard that she ignored and some of the children did, to then Janet telling her mum, because Peggy had heard noises from downstairs and she'd gone up to tell them to be quiet. And then the next one was the bed shaking, where Janet's bed shook and Billy's bed shook, and she shouted to her mum to get attention to come up to witness it.
I understand that, but I also understand kids and the fact that they don't tell you everything all of the time either.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a very tenuous one. I don't agree with that. I think the activity started at that point, and that's what the big deal was. I think if anything, the amount of activity validated some kind of need to feel wanted. That she was bullied at school. There'd been a split in the family. Somebody had posited a possibility that that they'd given her they'd wrongly described her as being the eldest daughter. So because of that, they'd said that she made up a lot of the activity because she wanted attention, because attention had been drawn away from her because of all the siblings were younger. And you're seeing stories like that on the internet when it's completely factually incorrect. She was the second eldest, it was Margaret, Peggy, Johnny, then Billy being the youngest. But I'm not so sure about that. If you watch the videos of her when she's giving interviews and talking about Bill Wilkins, she comes across as being as passing it off as being of no significance whatsoever, because she doesn't feel like it's a bad thing, which would go against her having witnessed it for so long and wanting to get some kind of recognition for seeing it, experiencing it, and nobody else had up until that point, if you're following me. Yeah.
Sorry, strike that comment.
What have we got? I think that the early stages were genuine. I thought that's an interesting one. I think that the early stages were genuine. I just think kids being kids made a lot up also. Yeah, I can subscribe. As Guy, they did get a priest. They got a priest at the beginning who didn't want anything to do with it, and then the priest again disappeared. They got a priest again at the end. Hi there, Rev. Thanks for dropping in. Nice to see you. A priest came along later on and done some kind of house cleansing, of which their want is to do. But many mediums had been there. I mean, I think there was quite a few in the timeline you give, Steve. It wasn't exactly like they were wanting for mediums that visited the property either.
No, not at all. There was the guy from Amsterdam, one that we brought over. But it's like a lot of things, isn't it? Everybody sort of wants to jump out of the woodwork when something this happens, because once they get attached to something, it sort of brings their profile up as well. I think, to be honest, if it would have been in the modern day, so to speak, with the likes of, like we were discussing before, about social media and the way that news is now processed, I tell you what, I think they would have been queuing outside to get in there.
Yeah,
I do think that's a good point though, because like Guy Playfair had said himself that even though there was instances where they'd known that the girls had done some kind of fakery and trickery, that they were doing it as mimicry. They weren't doing it as, creativity as such. Yeah. They were mimicking phenomena that they'd witnessed themselves and then trying to recreate it. Now, were they doing that because they enjoyed the attention? I mean, that flies in the face of the fact that Janet at school was called Ghost Girl, and they'd put crane flies down the back of his shirt, and that Billy was also bullied at school. I believe John went to boarding school, but the children were bullied at school. So would they attract that kind of negative attention to themselves at school by prolonging attention in the media? Do you understand where I'm coming from with that?
Yeah. I mean, as one who's worked in the media, I do know how things get twisted to make a story. And I do think at times that people who are in a situation where the media is brought in, it does make things worse. And, certainly for kids at school, you know what kids are like. I mean, they'll latch onto anything and cause as much bloody problems for anybody as they can. And I do think that's probably what happened there. that, you know, once the media got hold of it and started putting out these stories and that, you know, the entire case for me, it started off with something, sort of snowballed into something else. But whichever way you look at it, it's that tiny little kernel of something being there that actually did happen. And, you know, what we have to do as investigators, and it's unfortunate the media doesn't do this, because what they want to do is get people watching programs, selling newspapers, but we want to get to the truth of it. And we have to sift through all the crap that's been shown, all the crap that's been said. And sometimes it's difficult, but I do honestly believe that sometimes in the future that we will find out that there is quite a bit which is nonsensical, but right at the heart of all of this, there is definitely something that went on that we can't explain.
Okay, well, I'll go into, we'll cover a little bit about the media in a second, actually. But in answer to your question there, Stranger Times, Maurice Grosse has passed away.
Yeah.
Guy Playfair has passed away. Peggy Hodgson, the mother, has passed away. Billy, Billy, sorry, I think Johnny's passed away from cancer. Margaret's still alive, as far as I'm aware. The elder daughter, Janet, is still alive and well. In fact, she's been quite vocal about things recently. As far as the Nottinghams, Vic and Peggy Nottingham, I'm not so sure. John Burkham, I think he's passed away. Sylvia Burkham, I think she's passed away. Ros Morris, one of the investigators from the BBC, she's still alive. Graham Morris is still alive. Doug Bence is still alive. So a lot of the people that witnessed the events, the investigators, are still alive, as far as I'm aware. And people from the Society of Psychical Research are still around. So there is still a few people alive that witnessed the actual events that went on. We'll go to the media in a sec. I just thought, we assume spirits need energy. Do you think the girls may be acting up a fake and could have fueled activity? I think there isn't any way of ruling it out or in that. So I think it's a very valid and good point, well made. Is it a similar story to Bowley Rectory? Not really. Bowley Rectory is, like I say, you've got Alexander. This guy, like I said right at the beginning of the video, has got to go down as writing the title for one of the longest book titles ever invented. Is our Alexander Telfair, and I'll say it again just for the sake of for fun. But Alexander Telfair, in the 17th century, covered the story or looked into the case of a poltergeist event that happened in Scotland, known as the Mackie or Eric poltergeist. This was in 1696, by the way. And he wrote it's a pamphlet, really, but it was a book, probably a book with an E on the end, so a bookie. And because they were all called that in them days, weren't they? And this guy, the title of this book was A True Relation of an Apparition, Expressions and Actings of a Spirit, which infested the house of Andrew Mackie in Ringcroft of Stocking in the Paroch of Rerick in the Stewartry of Kirkcudbright in Scotland by Mr. Alexander Telfair, minister of that paroch, and attested by many other persons who were also eye and ear witnesses, to give it its full title.
Yeah,
so
exactly Jaws, is it?
Not really. Or it. So we got our mate Alec Telfair in the 17th century, so looking into poltergeist activity, and you've also got
Dave.
I didn't hear you because I was speaking. What
was the name of that bookie?
And you've got, of course, Bowley Rectory. You got Harry Price being a prime investigator. So long before you Ed and Lorraine Warrens and other people that were indeed, for that Maurice Grosse or Guy Playfair, there were people out there that were obviously looking into it many years ago. The Enfield events were recreated when making Ghostwatch. Yes, I believe it. Yeah, yes, I watched it. Yeah. Okay, so media. Let's have a look at some of the media things. Again, as Steve alluded to, when it comes to... okay, no problem, Stranger Times. Thanks for dropping by. It's appreciated. You take it easy, and thank you again. Media. Steve.
Yeah.
So there's the girls hurled from their beds in House of Terror.
It's just a typical media headline. I say it's just to sell newspapers. Nowadays it'd be classed as clickbait.
It's sensationalisation, that, isn't it?
Yeah. And straight away it brings people in with to read it, and they've already got it in the mind then that something horrible is happening. They don't have to look into any of the facts. All they need to know is that something terrible is happening. At the time, around that time, we had stuff like the Amityville horror and things like that. So people buy into that, and it's just disgusting. And then you've got the kids who have to live through it. The media has got no respect for anybody. All they want to do is sell papers and get figures up on TV.
Okay, another one there. Ghost story and bumps that baffle boffins and the strange case of the dancing teapot.
Now that's a headline and a half, I must admit.
Now I think it should be mentioned. Of course, hi there, Dave. Nice to see you. Thank you for dropping by. I think it should be mentioned, of course, while we're on the subject of media, that it was actually the Daily Mirror that contacted the Society of Psychical Research, and that's the reason Maurice Grosse was there in the first place. It wasn't the police didn't. The Nottinghams didn't contact anybody, and Peggy Hodgson had no idea who to turn to, and it was actually the newspaper that contacted the Society of Psychical Research, and then they sent out, like I say, Maurice Grosse, along with two of their reporters on that night. In fact, the first time that he went there, Maurice Grosse didn't really have a plan of action per se, other than to say, log down any events as you see them, write them down. I'm going to go back to the Society of Psychical Research and do a cry for help. In a room full of people that went silent, didn't respond to him apart from one, who is the said Guy Playfair, who had just come back from, he'd been writing books, he'd been away, he was supposed to be taking a break, but he cancelled his break so that he could help Maurice Grosse for this investigation.
It's pretty much standard procedure, though, isn't it? I mean, if we ever go in anywhere and anything's going on, one of the first things we say is, have you been keeping a record? If not, will you do so? So, what Maurice Grosse actually said was bang on. It's just a shame that the Society of Psychical Research didn't take it on as seriously as they sort of did eventually when they came up with the committee to look after stuff. And it was like, say, only guy Leon Playfair who sort of said, you know what, let me have a look. And he only expected to be there for a couple of times, but ended up there for, 185 days or something?
Yeah, 180 days and 25 full night vigils, yeah.
It's quite a lot.
Few more media reports here for everybody's delectation.
That's probably what's in it. The Radio Times, that with one of those little things they stick in a corner to say about an upcoming show. Doesn't tell you absolutely nothing. So it's got to be the BBC. That
looks BBC-ish, doesn't it?
Well, it's a report about Rosalind Morrison. She was a BBC reporter, so yeah. There's no shortage of them, though. You know what I mean? Obviously, because as you know, and the people in the chat know, this was massively covered. Knock, knock, and the poltergeist calls. Very original, Pearson Phillips. Thank you for that. What else have we got going on? There's a few more, but I may as well show them. I mean, that's what we're here for, aren't we? So here we go. Check this one out. I saw toy bricks go shooting across a room. So, obviously, either quoting, Graham Morris or any number of people that might have obviously been witness to that particular series of events. And as far as I'm led to believe, yellow bricks seem to be the sort of choice of projectile.
I think any form of Lego would be, it'd be something, anything whizzing around a room or being thrown at you or hitting you, Lego, whatever colour, it doesn't matter. I think it was something that you're going to go, oh, this isn't quite right, is it?
Yeah, I think it's like M&Ms, isn't it? You can have a favourite colour or a colour you don't like, and the same thing obviously with Poltergeist regarding Lego bricks.
Yeah. Was it not once for yes and not twice if you want a purple coloured piece M&M?
You imagine a prima donna Poltergeist turning around and saying, "I'm not going to do any activity unless you take out all the green ones."
Yeah, it's sort of getting in the lines then of a rock band on tour, isn't it, for a rider?
So Dr. Beloff there, I'm not impressed, and Morris Gross, it is genuine. So a conflict of SPR members.
It's always the case, though, isn't it? Whether you're looking at a paranormal thing or a UFO thing, you're going to get some people who are going to say, you know what, this is the ultimate proof in what is going on. It's absolutely true. And then somebody else is going to go, well, actually, it's a load of nonsense. And, case in point, in recent times, in light of, as we've heard recently in the UFO stuff, with the United States Navy saying, you know what, something's going on, but we don't know what it is. You're now getting all these documentaries now coming onto TV at one time where they used to say, you know what, UFO, what's going on? Now it's all a case of UFOs. Is it actually real? The story's twisted. It's been switched round on its head. And that's what the media does. It tries to stir up so much crap between people just so it can sell something.
But you also see division, don't you? I mean, I think we all know about, things like the Rendlesham and the Broadhaven cases. Any high-profile cases will invariably stir up differences between experts, and a lot of it is just down to how you interpret the evidence.
And that's it. That's it. At the end of the day, it's interpretation and perception of stuff, and that's what you got to take down from it.
Well, it becomes a double-edged sword as well, doesn't it? Because without media, without a sort of media frenzy surrounding certain events, the exposure to certain phenomena isn't out there. Word of mouth isn't enough.
Yeah.
It's the insidious way that they go about presenting it. That's the problem.
It becomes a form of propaganda. That's the way I see it. I mean, like I say, I've worked in it, and I've been in newsrooms where it's a case of like, how can we sell this story? And that's basically what they do. They try to sell a story, so they will put like a tagline on it of horror or of terror, just because once you see that, it's like, oh, what's this? And it drags you into it.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it works, isn't it? It has to have a hook, just like music does. I mean, otherwise it doesn't grab your attention, so it becomes pointless.
So the fact that one side.
Yeah.
One at a time, guys, or you just get a heterodyne.
I was going to say the problem with the printed press is that they're not used to reporting sophisticated reportage or complex stories. They're about big strap lines that, say, fire or whatever.
Okay, let's have a look. Direction of travel, sort of, regarding the Lego bricks. They would see them come at them when they've been floating. Now, these Lego bricks have been floating in the air, or even sometimes circling the room. And I, by all accounts, they've come from that particular group that are in the air. And when they've been hit by Lego bricks, they've been hit by levitating Lego bricks that they can visually see, and then they get smacked by a Lego brick. Vic Nottingham, the neighbour from next door, got hit in the elbow by a Lego brick, and Graham Morris, the Daily Mirror photographer, who ended up being one of the longest serving members of the investigative team, if you like, got hit in the right eyebrow by a flying Lego brick, so.
Funny thing though, with Lego, the worst thing you can do with Lego is stand on it rather than get hit by it, but there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
The worst thing is if you stand on a 3-pin plug. That's the worst thing.
That is true.
Of course, Janet, like I say, has been, I wouldn't say the poster girl, because that's probably doing her a disservice, but a lot more vocal than anybody else since the event. That's Janet fairly recently. I think that might be for a Channel 4 documentary. They usually are.
Yeah.
But there's Janet Hodgson in a more recent image. Still maintaining the story. Another one. Want to press the right buttons. Okay, here we go. Another one. There's another one of our Jan. She likes to be called that. Like again, more recent and more recent to shop at more recent. So she's obviously still stick. Yeah, I know it was a bad one. Still sticking to a story. Okay, well, we get the kind of idea. Okay, right. So now's the time of night, the time of the doings where we answer any questions. We sort of already been doing that, to be fair. But if there's any questions that anybody have got, fling them up to us, and we'll try and answer them, or we'll try and get you to answer them. Either way, whichever works. Please feel free to ask questions. It says so. Do that.
Or else.
Please feel free to ask questions. If anybody in the chat's got any questions regarding the case, there's lots of more information than we can cover here, all over the internet. Should you want to delve that little bit deeper,
it's like we always say, though, isn't it? This it sort of generates people's interest, and if they want to go out and look for more, it's all out there. It's just a case of going out and finding it.
Absolutely. Paranormal Chapel. I will highlight that because I'm that kind of guy. Wouldn't her age come into play, coming into womanhood, so to speak? I read that at stage of mine tends to lash out. Yeah, I alluded to this at sort of the beginning of the video regarding historically known cases of poltergeist activity and possession cases. Generally, for the most part, affecting prepubescent teenage girls, but anywhere from females from being 8 to 78 years of age, and that overstimulation of the hypothalamus can be indicative of interaction with paranormal phenomena, although it's not completely understood why at the minute. But yes, certainly. That would seem to be the case, that her age, and indeed even Margaret, and indeed even the mother Peggy, because they're all within that 8 to 78 age group. But yeah, historically and more notoriously teenage girls for the most part. Yeah. Let's have a look. They see your legs and arms. Yes, apparently Hazel did. The lollipop lady. Hazel did. Our Hazel. She would keep her lollipop in the garden, in the yard of the Hodgsons, because it saved her lugging it to and from work. I can only assume that's why she was in the position she was to witness this. Obviously she did, not that she just knows the family. She'll have known them reasonably well for that to be the case. But yeah, certainly Hazel said that Hazel shot. It would, like I say, she was the lollipop lady and a neighbor as well. But she said that she did see that. She saw her floating, full body, like horizontally floating around the room, and books floating around. And yeah, so that's, like I say, Hazel. She was the lollipop lady at Brimsdown Primary School. And books were floating with her, and the curtains were blowing, but the windows were closed, is what Hazel reportedly saw. Are there any questions in the chat, please? Again, I think that's another good question. That was, I think, the other guys can also comment on this if they wish to. Is one that was always put forward as being a possibility that Maurice Grosse, because I assume you mean Maurice Grosse when you put in Maurice's their recent loss. So you're talking about her daughter Janet. Was that playing a big part in it? Now, it's been posited that not only was it playing a part in so much as people were assuming that there was a projection on the part of Maurice Grosse to want to believe what was happening was completely paranormal just because of that alone. Projection on the part of Maurice Grosse towards activity happening when he was there because it was affecting him and he was adding to the energy. even if in a convoluted way, he was adding to the energy, and that energy was being used vicariously through the loss of his daughter. However, other people that were around at the time that I've spoken to him have said unequivocally that no, he was always very objective about the way that he approached the investigation, and he was always he was always of the opinion that it was either due to psychokinesis or telekinesis or a poltergeistic explanation for the activity that the house was experiencing. I don't know if any of you two guys want to elaborate upon that.
Must have been a factor. It must have been a factor at some level. His conviction in not just the case, but his interest in the subject must have been a factor. I mean, it's a profound thing, profoundly tragic thing to happen, is it? It must have been a factor.
You often find when people suffer a great loss like that, they do start have a tendency to look at, excuse me, spiritualism and looking for signs within this, that, and the other. And it would be very easy to turn around and say, yeah, well, Maurice Grosse, yeah, he was sort of picking up on things and using what was happening as his little linchpin to things. But, who knows? Like I say, you have to be there at the time. We weren't. A lot of other people weren't either. And it's very easy to cast aspersions on stuff, but unless you're actually there at the time, it's very difficult.
True.
Hi, Selena. Thanks for dropping by. It's nice to see you. Thank you for showing your support and dropping in the chat. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, objectivity is subjectivity, especially on a personal level. Obviously, it walks hand in hand with that. He of course, he would be mindful every time he looked at the girls that he had lost a daughter. The main focus for the poltergeist activity was called Janet. His daughter was called Janet.
Yeah.
He had to have had some kind of thoughts regarding that in his head, despite what he said and despite what that mean, whether it influenced him to a massive extent. Again, that's open to conjecture, but I would think it did, despite what people have said in defense of him. It must have played quite a big part. It must have done.
It's obvious that he could, and I'm sure he did conduct himself with objectivity, but there's a difference between trying to be objective within a case like this and actually the reasons that you have an interest in the first place. As Steve was just saying, very often people turn to certain interests when they've been personally affected, especially by something traumatic. And as we know, trauma is a big ingredient in these occurrences.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, and as I said earlier, a lot of paranormal investigators now are using a particular Mel meter because of somebody else's tragedy, Gary Galka losing his daughter Mel. So
it's a really good question I'm just put to you there, Dave. Yeah.
Well, do you think the case has ultimately had a detrimental impact upon how the paranormal field is viewed, given the claims of faking? I absolutely don't think it's done it any good. But of course, Mr. Price was accused of exactly the same thing in the 30s because of ball erectory, and of course you had the so-called mediums, trans mediums of the Victorian era, which were absolutely blown out of the water by people like Harry Houdini, and was famous for debunking spiritual mediums and trans mediums. So it was starting to be called into question at its inception as being fashionable, for want of a better terminology. So I certainly don't think it's helped how the paranormal field is viewed. And then if you look at all the TV shows that have come since, the sensationalism that they bring with them for obvious reasons, that's also had a detrimental effect.
I just wonder, Dave, how often, I mean, I've seen something like this. My mum was a great believer in this stuff, and she maintained throughout her life that this had happened to her in her youth. I just wonder, though, how much of this sort of thing, especially when people are portrayed in a negative light, actually prevents them from reporting things that do happen, either to people like yourselves in the field or further afield to the press or authorities.
I would say most certainly.
Yeah.
it's the stigma that becomes attached to it. You know, as soon as you say something regards of, oh, I saw this, I saw that, I've experienced this, experienced that.
Yeah.
Invariably, people think you're a nutball. I mean, again, going back to the ufology side of it, look at pilots. Perhaps some of the best people on the planet who could witness something up in the air, and yet none of them will report it. They're out on their ear. So, you know, you have to be careful what you do. And
well, especially with professional people who are frightened of ridicule for obvious reasons. Yeah.
Exactly. And those are the kind of people that if they did come out and say, you know, what was this, would be classed as an absolute, you know, a prime observer, like the, you know, the lady police officer who observed this case, fantastic witness. But a lot of people will not do it because it will affect the career.
Yeah.
I do have to say this. Whilst at one time you were ridiculed for making any claims of anything happening, whether it was regarding hauntings, possession, poltergeist, demons, whatever you want to say, not now. Able to do that now. It's okay to do that. In fact, it's okay to do it to the extent that people will make things up and waste your time, so that you travel to their house to investigate things you know can't be happening. Now, you'll get a jump from certain phenomena happening at certain locations throughout history that will mirror other events that happen throughout different periods of history. And then, okay, Squatching, no problem at all. Thanks for dropping by. It's appreciated. Whereas now to the present day, they would present certain phenomena that would be indicative of certain types of alleged causes, if you like.
Yeah.
Now, the sheer amount of TV shows, the sheer amount of media coverage of this kind of things now means that at a lot of locations, people are experiencing every single type of phenomena that would otherwise be confined towards certain cases. Now you're getting everything happening at one time.
Yeah, you message Dave saying, you know, Derek Acker's "Get It Off Me, Sam" sort of thing. You know, you're right. I think what's happening is that something that paranormal people said. You know, the press went along with it. The press will always go along with something that increases their circulation. That's what they're there for, unfortunately. And very often they're not interested in the veracity of the evidence or the truth of the case. What they're interested in is it's caught people's imaginations, and they will buy more newspapers, unfortunately.
The answer to that is yes, and not just by the SPR. As a member of the Society for Psychical Research, everything that he put forward was absolutely ripped apart, and by members that I suppose in many ways you would expect would try to show some level of support, but beyond that wasn't the case at all. Many people went out of the way to debunk everything he put forward. One of them that was very vocal about it was John Bailoff from the SPR. He thought that everything that Maurice Grosse presented as being put forward was just not anything that he made it out to be in any way, shape or form. Milbourne Christopher was another one. Magician, he also thought that it was all forgery and fake. Hans Bender suggested that they get some kind of psychological help and see a priest. You know, John Hasted was another one, and there were actually lots of people that absolutely ripped apart the evidence that they put forward, and because of the lack of evidence, because of the amount of interruption, the amount of activity that prevented them from getting more evidence, the way that video cameras affected, the way that audio recorders were affected, meant that that Maurice Grosse and Guy Playfair were absolutely adamant that everything that they experienced, even though you didn't catch it, you can look at a photograph that they caught, and they would say this themselves, but that wasn't reflective upon the events that they witnessed with their own eyes. And of course, because of that, all we're left with is personal testimony of what they say. See you later, Squatching. Thanks very much for dropping by. And I think on top of that, you've got to bear in mind that we're talking about the Enfield case, and a lot of the evidence that they think they had, or the evidence that they put forward as being thus the evidence, we're subject to. We can see this. We're seeing a lot of the photographs. We can hear the audio. So we're privy to a lot of the evidence that he alleged he'd caught, as did Guy Playfair, with it being a very public and high-profile case. But that is it's a good question. He certainly absolutely got. That's the thing. There you go. Their conclusion was that it was unexplained. And to me, that comes across as being very middle ground, not willing to back him, not willing to go against him. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I think exactly what you're saying there, Dave. If they were so sure of what they believe was absolutely nonsense, why would they put out like it was, unexplained? Again, it's what I've been saying all along. Unless you're there, you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a very poor conclusion for the Society of Psychical Research, for the simple reason you've got evidence to show, and if anybody was worth the salt, they would go out there and they would see for themselves what was going on. And you can turn up and you can sort of say, oh well, on this night it didn't happen. But you know what? We've been on investigations ourselves where we've got we've gone somewhere and nothing's happened on one night, but you can go back another night and all hell breaks loose. It all depends at the time what's happening and everything else. So I'm very disgusted with the fact of how they actually treated him from beyond that, and then still had the audacity to come out and say, "Oh, this is unexplained."
I think they've also it's worthy of note that they still put it forward. They're still proud of the fact that they're the people that investigated the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a feather in the cap at the end of the day, but I mean, to what extent? They've not exactly turned around and say, you know what, this is evidence of something that is absolutely beyond belief. They just sort of gone, it's like John Major, wasn't it, in years gone by with politics. All he did was sit on the fence, and basically they're the John Major of parapsychology.
Hi, Matthew. Thanks for stopping by. Nice to see you there. Oh, it's very nice of you. Miss you too, sir. Just been a little bit busy doing things. But nice to see you. Nice. I will put this up. I've only just seen this, Selena. Yeah. I don't know about poor Ike, actually.
The thing with David Icke, Selena, to remember is that a lot of what Ike is saying works on two levels, and what a lot of people think is Ike is using the lizard thing, the language and the accusations and the thing about the Illuminati to actually draw attention to political and social inequalities. So in a way, yes, he's been ridiculed and people are taking the mickey out of him. But frankly, by doing so, he's drawing attention to the things that he would like to be discussed. That's one theory. It's one theory I happen to subscribe to because I think Ike is quite a clever guy and he's very good at getting people to listen to him, whether or not they're laughing. He gets a lot of attention.
You know what? Whatever you have to say about David Icke when it comes to civil liberties, he certainly knows that inside out.
He does, Steve, and he also has a very good idea of the way that global politics works. So I find it hard to reconcile some of the more lunatic things that are part of his theory without thinking that there's an ulterior motive behind it. And I think the motive that somebody like Ike has is to actually draw attention to the incredible inequalities of the 1% as opposed to the rest of us. The lizard thing could be taken to be a metaphor because they may as well be aliens, and I think Ike actually knows exactly what he's doing, to be honest.
There you go, Selena. Very eloquently covered there by Steve and Nodule. Any more questions in the chat or anything that you want us to go over or chat about or discuss, then please let us know. We've managed to get 2.5 hours out of this one as well, guys.
It makes it sound like a car and a tank of petrol. Dave, can I ask you a question? I mean, you're a guy who really knows this stuff, and I know this is a famous case, and it's one of the reasons I was keen to listen to what you got to say, and not least because Steve always does us proud with the timelines. In retrospect, now, I mean, it's a very mature case now. What's your opinion about it? What's your conclusion?
My conclusion about this case is there was activity going on at that address. There were things going on that are massively difficult to explain. Now, whether it's down to the energy in the environment being manipulated subconsciously because of overstimulation of parts of a teenage girl's brain,
yeah,
I don't know. But there was activity going on at that location. That activity was impacted upon by mimicry by the girls, which called into question the validity of the very true activity that was going on. There were over 30 witnesses to certain events.
Yeah.
There were over 30 witnesses to furniture being thrown around, to Lego bricks flying, to books floating, to Janet levitating. Now, obviously, I'm not going to name any names or any cases that I've been involved in where it's been what's been alluded to being poltergeist type activity. But all I can say is that I've seen things that I find massively difficult to explain, and I try to give as many prosaic answers to phenomena that I see as I possibly can. I try to remain as on the fence as I possibly can for as long as I can, because as a paranormal investigator, as researchers, as ufologists, as cryptozoologists, we sort of owe it to ourselves to do that. We owe it to the field that we profess to be investigators of to do that. But I've seen enough, I've experienced enough to be able to relate to what people have said. I've been there when people have seen what I have seen and experienced what I have seen at the same time, for me to know that what I am seeing is actually happening. And I'm also aware that it leaves, with saying that, it leaves it open to conjecture, as if to say group hypnosis and all that kind of thing. And again, all I've got is my word in a lot of the things that I've seen and experiences that I've had. What occurred at Green Street, there were some elements of what occurred at Green Street that were very, very real. Some of the phenomena that the girls experienced were very, very real. If it was only real to them, if it was only real to the people involved at the time, then it was still real.
Yeah.
Whether that comes under the umbrella term of paranormal, whether that comes under whether it was down to the angry spirit energy of Bill Wilkins, of Stuart Surton, of Fred, of various other people that allegedly made themselves known via the vocalizations of Janet Hodgson, by the claims of Margaret Hodgson, and of various other witnesses. I don't know. But I think because this case keeps coming up, this case draws so many people in, this case confounds a lot of people that look at it. The very fact that there is fakery always calls into question the real events. And because of that, this will always be a case that is always under scrutiny. It's a case that will always be doubted. It's a case that will always be classed as being fake, but it's one that will always crop up because there's elements within it that are true. And I think it's a difficult one, Nudge. It's a difficult one.
Absolutely, and it interests me, Dave, because there are obviously parallels here between the paranormal and ufology, where you know that there are certain aspects of UFO cases that absolutely something strange has been sighted, and then people climb on the bandwagon and gild the lily and come out with untruths and try to draw patterns and things that aren't relevant to it. And before you know it, you've got you've got more noise than sound, and you've got more heat than light, and the two things get muddied. So I was interested to hear your measured response, given the fact that I know that that's the way that you work.
But this is one of the reasons why we try to adopt a scientific method to the way that we actually investigate stuff. That we do try to look at stuff and things which we can say this isn't the case or that isn't the case. We can shift all them out of the way, and it's like everything in it. Once you've got everything that can be explained, whatever's left. Obviously, if that's unexplainable, that's what you're left with.
Oh, I think science is like that. Science is a mortar and pestle, and you grind away at the facts and the irrelevances until what you're left with, hopefully, is some sort of pure product, even if there's nothing left and it turns out not to be true. At least you've looked at it and atomized it, coldly and objectively, and you've peer-reviewed it and all the rest of it. I think the scientific method is something that should be, used and employed by more than just science. It'd be nice.
Ghost Ops.
It'd be nice if our politicians were that way, for example.
Thanks for dropping by, Ghost Ops. Nice to see you there, brother. I will highlight this because that's the kind of guy I am. I've seen weird stuff. It's when money becomes king, I have to question the honesty of the claim more.
Yep.
I don't
think they made a massive amount out of this, did they, Dave? From what I remember, but
I think Janet and Janet might have done because of acting as what do they call them when the film The Conjuring 2.
Oh right, okay, I stand corrected.
But regarding the case itself,
I think that's absolutely right. I think if somebody is incentivized to tell lies and make gain or get attention from it, then from my perspective, somebody who's of a slightly skeptical disposition will always be suspicious. I agree.
What do they call it? Not when you're a researcher, but when you're a consultant. There you go.
Yep.
A consultant on the film The Conjuring 2. Maybe for that. Paid by the papers, the Daily Mirror, and BBC and everything that was going on at the time. As far as I'm aware, no. They were quite vocal about the fact that, and this is other people as well. This isn't the newspapers claiming that they didn't give the Hodgson family any money. This is what they did do, though, is they sent them away. They give them a holiday, and I think that's more to get them out of the location, to give them a break, because they felt sorry for them rather than them giving them money for the story. So as far as the Hodgsons are concerned, as far as the Enfield case is concerned, that one wasn't based around money. However, Shire, your comment completely stands, because there's been many more cases which have been absolutely massively influenced by greenbacks.
It absolutely does, and it warps the truth as well. And it must be said that there are more forms of currency than just money. Very often, attention is worth its weight in gold to people who crave it.
Absolument. Is there any questions or statements within the Chattanooga? Any questions, statements, or things you would like us to discuss that's related to this that we can go over before we call it a night? It's nearly 3 hours worth, so thanks again to everybody who stuck with us for this long. Yet very much appreciated, and obviously you got nothing else to do on a Friday night.
Except down beers, and none of us know anything about that.
There you go. Actually, I think I was just going to say, I think Nod should recount that statement, given what's going on behind the scenes at Steve's house there.
Duly recounted. I don't need to, because Steve's drinking for both of us.
There you go.
I'm being good tonight.
He's only had 7. Yeah. He likes the odd drink. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11.
There you go. He does like his Spaniard towns. San Miguel, San Cerros, all this. Any questions? And then, or else I'm gonna call it quits tonight. It's definitely an interesting case, though.
Fascinating case, yeah.
Banging your drums.
I beg your pardon.
Bang it. Is this to me because I'm a drummer? Or I am actually
metaphorical.
I am actually a drummer. So is that because of that, or do you mean banging the drummers in like getting the message out to the masses? In what context is that, Mark? I like it in whatever context it is anyway, so no worries. What's this? How can science make a possession? I assume it can't, at least not by means we have now, because psychology can explain it away in so many other ways.
Yeah, science isn't about answers. Science is about questions, and it's also about a process and ways of thinking. But I think that the view that we've seen throughout the COVID-19, the whole pandemic has kind of drawn up the weaknesses that people have in terms of what they think about science. Science won't bring solutions or answers. It will just ask the right questions.
Like, is there medical evidence on spirit possession? There is medical evidence to suggest that people who are claiming to have spiritual possession are suffering from a mental health disorder. So the answer to that in this grand scheme of things is really no. However, yes, because they explain it away as being borderline personality disorder, multiple personality disorder, schizophrenia, mania, even if it's transient, environmental induced mania. So, it's a yes and no. No in the way that you're asking, but yes in the way that science wants to portray it.
Can I just add something? I mean, I haven't got the details here. We'd have to do the proper research too, but it was something that I read many years ago. That they did experiments when they opened people's skulls open and had the brain free, that they stimulated certain areas of the brain with electrical current, and people were speaking, and it was literally things from another life, nothing to do with theirs. It was stuff from, and it was backed up later on when they actually did the research, that these people were talking about previous life experiences. So yeah, it may not be regarding possession, but there is something to say that there is some kind of like race memory or whatever within the human brain. I would have to do the research on it again. Like I say, it was an article that I read many years ago, but I could certainly look into that. But it would sort of fit into that criteria of what you're just talking about.
You've got to question the level of it being a controlled study group as well, hasn't it? That has to be brought into question because of people's exposure to information, and even if it's in a subconscious way. I mean, the areas in the brain responsible for communication, Vernix area and Broca's region, if there's any kind of damage to that, people can start to speak in languages that they shouldn't know, and a lot of the time it's Latin. At one time it was Latin, and this sort of went hand in hand with many people went to Catholic schools, many people went to church, so they would hear Latin recanted. So Latin would be spoke by people that were having alleged possessions at that time, when they were having like a transient attack of like electrical activity within Vernix area, Broca's region of the brain. So the science can still explain a lot of it, but as Steve says, there is sort of like little snippets of information and studies out there that certainly whet paranormal investigators' appetite.
There's no doubt also that reality, that, I mean, we've all been, what we're skirting around the issue of here is the reality that people experience in these extraordinary circumstances. There's no doubt now, if Einstein's taught us one thing, it's that even physical phenomenon are relative to the people or person who experiences it. And certainly the psychological thing we call reality differs from person to person. We all experience reality differently, all of us.
I think more importantly, it's worth going to the statement that Mark said there. Oh yeah, great setup, fella. Yeah, it is, mate. If anybody out there is a drummer, you'll know where he's coming from with that. Yeah, it's good stuff.
What does a drummer get on an IQ test? Drool.
Yeah, I will just mute. I will just mute your microphone in a minute. I'll tell you what, Nodge. What I will do, I will do better than that. I will invite you to the rehearsal room so you can sit behind a drum kit and show me your chops.
Matron.
Rubbish at drums.
We'll leave it at that then, shall we?
I have a drum track on my synth.
We'll leave it at that. Here we go. Because this is what we're alluding to. I've seen someone who was epileptic in the midst of a seizure who literally spoke in tongues. Yeah, well, there you go again. Like I said, it
comes back to your statement, Dave, about Broca's area. I was actually in hospital once. I was staying over, just had an operation, and an old chap was brought in who'd had an accident, and he was very delirious, and he was speaking plain English, and then suddenly, like you were saying, he was obviously Catholic, but he lapsed into perfect Latin, as you'd hear a priest say in mass. Perfect.
Yeah.
It just does very, very odd things to people.
But is it considered possession, or is that unlocking the blocked area of the human mind? There's actually less scientific evidence to suggest there is a locked area of the human mind. Yeah. You hear many statements of the human being only uses 30% of his brain. No. That's not true. I
used to work at the Department of Psychology at Manchester University. I was originally a technical photographer, and one of the things they were doing was actually exploring the nature of memory, and they found actually memory is not an individual part of the brain. It's actually dispersed throughout the brain, which is why people
throughout all regions of the brain. Yeah. So no, unfortunately not. It's no. The myth that we only use a certain part of our brain is unfortunately exactly that. It's a myth. Yeah. However, there are some people who don't use the brain at all. So
I'm here, David.
Hello, Jane. Thanks for dropping by. Excellent. Oh God.
Sorry.
You see, there you go. For that, as Andy said, there it can't be true. A lot of people would not be able to function on 30%.
I'm managing just fine, Andy. Thank you very much. What's your point?
Yeah, what was it you trying to say? My questions are horrid because paranormal is not my strongest. No question. The only bad question is one that doesn't get asked. Matthew, absolutely. You know, every question, all questions are fine. The only bad one is a question you don't ask.
Yeah, or something that doesn't actually, make you think or isn't uninteresting. So,
I mean, when you're talking about, like the human mind and stuff like that. I mean, you were talking earlier on about, the fallacies within what was going on, and that one of the girls was actually related to masturbation and stuff like that. But when you think about it, on one hand, it feels good.
I'm going to unmute my mic for that. I'm going to apologise for that. What Steve just said.
I was waiting for that. I really was waiting for that.
I promise that when this video gets uploaded, I'm going to blank that bit out of it. So sorry for that, everybody.
That was a Nick Pope moment there. I think we're on 9 and 11 now.
You see, the thing for the prolonged silence from both me and Nodge there is because we're used to that kind of behaviour from Steve.
This is what did we work out before, Dave? 76 years between us.
Between us, we've known him 76 years. Yeah. So,
geez, I went trying to work out how many life sentences that was before, but there we go.
He's around 5.
Unbelievable.
Oh my God!
Sorry, lads. I'll go home now.
And I'll get my coat.
Honestly, he makes Benny Hill seem like George Orwell. He really does.
Benny Hill? Who's he?
I do have hundreds of questions on this stuff. That's good, Matthew. This might not be the place for hundreds of them, though, unfortunately. But if you've got any more questions, anybody in chat, if you've got any more questions at all and nothing to do with masturbation, please put it in the side chat. Don't give Steve any feed lines for more crap jokes. Please.
Please do.
I think the serious point to make, Matthew, is that, of course, none of us have any definitive answers. All we're doing is trying to explore all of these ideas as best we can. There you go. A sensible answer for once.
Yeah, there you go. That's the most sensible answer you probably had for the last quarter of
That's
an hour,
the best
guys.
you get tonight, matey, I'll tell you.
Can I just chip?
Oh, jeez.
Please don't.
Let's call him the carpenter. He's always bleeding chipping in. Is there something you need to say, Steve?
No, nothing. Honest, I'll be good.
There you go. We talked. Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, we've spoke. I wouldn't say at length because we haven't. We've sort of like alluded to it briefly, and I don't want to make any at length jokes given the kind of mood Steve's in.
No,
we've spoken about just coming on and doing a stream where we just bounce off what people say in chat. Of course, I know that we do these so-called arranged. There is elements of we haven't got a clue what we're doing. Not so much not what we're talking about. No, you can't for Steve.
I'll tell you what, David. I've been managing for 57 years, not knowing what I'm doing. It works for me, buddy.
There you go. So you can't. That many people can't be wrong. Everybody. What do you say? I mean, with working with Nodge, we know that what he says makes sense mostly. But you're doing a chat where we just sort of bounce off what people are saying. Like I said, a lot of the time we do sort of organized. I use the term loosely. It's semi-organized. We know that we want to do a certain case. The other week was a little bit up in the air, I admit.
What's wrong with him? Are you still with us, Yarwood? What are you doing?
I'm okay. What are you on about?
All right.
Yeah.
I'm worried about you.
I'm worried about you.
So there's a couple of questions there. So now, do you believe there is any machines to this date to help study human nature besides splitting open a human skull? Well, medically, yes.
That one. Yeah.
There's CAT scans, CT scans, there's MRI machines, there's all sorts of things.
There is one of the problems is recording the data.
Yeah, so there you go.
You can do any amount of surgical procedures or even recording engrams and memory traces, but you can't actually trace the path of human thought. That's one of the problems. So the brain is an elusive thing, and it's not just that neurons and axons work. It's
neurologically, it's difficult to prove, isn't it? That, like you say, the pathway, the thought process, neurologically is difficult to be able to track down as
not just. You know what, Dave? I know that I was criticising before for people hiding behind the word quantum, but I was reading something on quantum physics last week, and they were saying that in terms of uncertainty, very often the nerve pathways in vegetation as well as animal life very often works because quantum signals between nerve endings are actually split so that it finds the most efficient way to actually, for example, in the case of a plant, draw light. Very often, a receptor in a plant will need to respond very, very quickly in order to actually make anything out of photoelectric energy that's coming from the sun. So, the problem with trying to use machines to study what people are experiencing and the memories that they have locked inside them is that it's almost impossible because the human organism is incredibly complex, and you can't just break it down to molecules and atoms.
So where you're going with it, Matthew, is there isn't any machine to measure experience. The only machine or computer that we have to measure experience is ourselves. Unfortunately, as Andy said, we can measure brainwave patterns, electrical impulses neurologically throughout the brain. But apart from that, only our own experiences can be measured by.
Although there is a way of enhancing that, Dave. There is a way of enhancing that. It's if you ask Steve, he'll tell you it's called 11 beers.
Yeah, there you go. A crate of San Miguel.
Excuse me, I have this feeling that I'm being picked on.
Quite rightly too. The amount of stuff we've had to put up with. Here we go. So do you think that there was something at Enfield, Steve?
Yes, I do. I think there was certainly that kernel of something that was going on, whether it was enhanced, whether it was faked afterwards for little bits, like you say, they were copying stuff that had gone on. But I honestly do think that something originally happened at Enfield, and you know, because of what's transpired, people are sort of kicking it to the curb. But I do think that in later days to come, that somebody will turn around and say, you know what, yeah, chuck that to one side, but something did happen.
Nodge.
I think exactly what Steve said. I do believe that there's a kernel of something very interesting at the heart of the case that was later embellished, and obviously Janet revelled in the role of being the instigator. I think what you saw on her face very often was not somebody that was being controlled or channeled, but somebody that was enjoying themselves and controlling the situation. However, I do believe that certain houses and certain places do carry an energy or the impression of other energies that we just don't know how to measure at the moment. And as a friend of mine said to me before, you know, we have a very, very narrow perception of the universe and the world around us because we only have 5 senses, and they're not big enough to pick up on everything that goes on.
We only have 5 senses, and 4 of them are up the Swanee when you Steve this far into a Friday night and you've got some beers at your disposal. So,
can I just say that I am actually a serious researcher, you cheeky sod?
There you go. He is. I mirror that fact, and he does that via pumping himself full of alcohol to get himself through the wee hours of the early hours of the morning.
I think I'm just looking, Dave. That's something Andy's saying there. I think, yeah, in the early part of the case, it does appear credible, and there's certainly some weird stuff went on. I used to work at the City of London Corporation, and somebody actually made mention of this case to me. I'd never heard of it before I was there, and it's spooky as hell when you actually go back to the kernel of it. Although I do think I maintain that Janet actually played up to it later on.
Can I just say something? I feel really
absolutely. Go on.
I feel really aggrieved here now that paranormal people are saying that you can't say organism around me. This is getting out of hand.
That's
terrible. I think there's while it might be terrible and while it might be getting out of hand, it's completely true nonetheless, isn't it? That's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what, I used to like you.
It's like lighting a fuse on to a bomb. You know, you just know what it's gonna lead to.
No, you don't.
Yeah. Light it and run. So Matthew never apologized for asking a question. Never. Not on this stream, not to me, not to Steve, not to Notch.
That's the rule.
The thing is that
good.
That banner at the bottom explains it all. Feel free to ask questions. If you wish, I will change that to say, please feel free to ask any questions. Whatever, don't ever worry about the questions you're asking. It's all relative.
Oh, no, this is getting out of hand, this.
The early evidence and witnesses were fairly credible. Yeah, we did cover that a little bit earlier, Andy, about the how it sort of it became almost like a self-reciprocating case. That the girls started to mimic phenomena that they experienced within the case. I mean, especially Janet's drawings. You know, it can't be the fact that until they'd met that gentleman from South America. I mean, Louis Gasparetto, who turned up and done drawings when he was in a trance. And Janet was completely mesmerized by this. Not long after that, she came out with drawings herself that were alluding to death and blood, and there were knives in them.
Tell you what, Dave and Steve in particular, I think the other week we were discussing Montauk, weren't we? Which I think is fascinating. But the fact of the matter is, no doubt that there was weird stuff going on there, and then everybody climbed on the bandwagon and spoiled it, and that's often what happens, isn't it?
Can I just make an observation?
Go on.
Ray Sansilla.
Okay, and with that, thanks for watching and good night.
No, what I'm saying is they're saying that, you know, the kids mimics what was going on. According to him, he made a crap load of money out of saying, oh, well, I saw this piece of film. We couldn't rescue it. So what we actually did was make a
film of the film.
Of the film.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a similar thing again, isn't it?
It is.
Do you think we could ever create a camera or something to be able to record a person's abduction, or will we? We've already got them kind of cameras.
Yeah.
We've already got them kind of cameras. We just haven't got that kind of footage or evidence.
Yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's taking the time getting it, aren't they? It's not like cameras are new, but
Well, there was a thing not so long back, wasn't it? There was supposed to be some photograph taken by some guy who said that he'd been abducted and he took pictures on board a spaceship. So they were, they weren't that good a photograph, but you could turn around and say, well, if you've been abducted, are you really going to get a really good photograph? Because you're not going to be too busy to say, stand there, just stay still a minute while I take this. You're going to be trying to get a picture out of your pocket with the camera in your pocket or whatever. Yeah. I personally don't think that it actually was. I think it was a load of hokum. But like I say, people have cameras on them pretty much all the time, especially if you're teenagers or early 20s. They're sort of glued to the hands. So
the thing is, how would you prove it? You could take a perfectly accurate picture, but nobody could believe it because it wouldn't prove anything in and of itself unless it was an extraordinary image. But yeah.
Any question? I'm not sure you want to go down that rabbit hole. I can answer that for you, my brother, and that is no. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole. However, the defenses of normality have already been breached by Steve's behaviour.
Do you want me to be quiet?
That's you got to be careful. One thing I will make aware to everybody is you got to be careful of that guy there, Ghost Ops. I'm not even going to put that comment up that you put in the chat there, Brandon. So forget it.
Yeah.
Yes, after the event they did, Max, but
redacted there. Yeah.
What people had seen at the beginning still stood. The phenomena that they experienced was still witnessed by people that didn't work for the media. So. But it certainly wouldn't have helped. It might have played a massive part upon the lifestyles of the family afterwards. They were definitely, like Janet was especially bullied at school because she was known as Ghost Girl. So the media didn't help, that's for sure. Oh, I may as well highlight these. Here we go. A hole is a goal.
God.
It absolutely is every time.
Well done, Shrimp.
Something Andy's just said there, Dave, is right. He said he knows it's a cop-out, but it's amazing how often things happen as soon as the cameras are off. I can tell you that as a photographer, that to be honest, the amount of time you have a camera on is a very small percentage of the actual time that you're around any particular place or phenomenon. So, yeah, absolutely.
Can I sort of jump in here about that?
No, the thing is Andy is actually a guy who does investigations with me, and I can say firsthand, and I know why he's making that comment because of certain investigations that we've undertaken where things have happened.
It's just something. I can't remember the name of the report. It was something Nicholson, I think it was, for BBC. He was covering a hijacking of an aeroplane. I think it was in Israel where there was hijackers on board and they were going to, send the people out one by one. And this Nicholson guy, he basically turned around and he was doing the report and he turned the cameras off once he'd done the report.
Yep.
And this other cameraman said, if I was you, I'd put your cameras back on now. And he said, why? He said, just switch them back on. So he turns them back on, and within seconds of turning it back on, they blew up the aircraft. And this Nicholson guy said to the guy, he said, oh my God. He said, how many times, how many people would have missed that? He said, thanks for that. He said, I don't even know how you did it. He said, well, I knew it because I'm one of the terrorists.
Yeah. About 1 million years ago, I did a City and Guilds photography, and I trained with an old press photographer who worked for the Evening News. And we were walking along and he was sort of saying, imagine a scenario whereby, there's about to be a car crash between a police car and something it's chasing or a building falls down. He said, why is your camera in its case? I said, well, because I'm not using it at the moment. He said, all right, get it out and get the camera on. And it takes about 40 seconds, which time, as Steve's just said, the opportunity is gone. So equipment is fallible, and usually the fallibility is the idiot who's not turned it on, which is usually me, I must confess.
I give you not posting my slender finger comment and minus 2.5 pork scratchings. For anybody who doesn't know, the pork scratching rating system has been an integral part of Darius Liv's videos for the past couple of weeks. So a -2.5 pork scratching. I'm sorry to hear that.
Kind of like a disgusting version of the Richter scale, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's good. I want to visit that creepy reservoir. You're absolutely more than welcome to, Shrimpus Maximus. I'm sure you would find it interesting. The trick would be to have two sets of cameras, so when one is say switched off, the others turn on. Yeah, and that's always a good idea in hindsight. It's remembering to do it beforehand. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a comment in there by someone called Stevie Arwood, by the way, Dave. I don't know who it is, but he's saying he's not a pervert, but he's also quite a decent investigator. Well, you know, the two things aren't always mutually exclusive, are they?
I could only mirror that comment, Nodge, and I've seen no evidence to support his claim.
Sod you.
There you go. Sod you, very famous paranormal investigator in the 1960s. He investigated the General Braithwaite.
Thank you for that articulate analysis, Mr. Yarwood. Would you like to present your rebuttal now?
Yeah, there you go. At the end of the night, we're down to sod yous.
Steve will now present his rebuttal.
And it'll end in off.
I'm being good now.
Here we go. Is we'd be saying that me and Andy in the comments there, and another gentleman conducted an investigation at a famous location in Yorkshire, known as the Haunted Bypass.
Stocksbridge.
And at the end of the Stocksbridge, and at the end of you don't give away locations to people. I thought you was a decent investigator.
I am.
He's giving away all the locations. Oh my God, that's the cardinal rule, and you broke it already.
Shut up.
You see, is everybody hearing this? So yeah, Stocksbridge. Anyway, this is at the end of the investigation, and we're driving down Peavide Lane, and we've gone past the steel foundry. And one of the phenomena that's reported there is a sound of children laughing. And we've gone past the steelworks and come up to the main road that goes through Stocksbridge town itself. And I'm thinking, there's not a great deal. There's nothing happening. I may as well turn off the camera and interact with the people within the car. And the car windows are rolled down. I turn off the recording, and seconds later, I stop doing the video recording. And seconds later, we hear kids laughing. We hear the laugh of children coming from the street, the main phenomena that's reported, and every single one of us in the car heard it. So that's what happens when you turn the camera off.
Yeah, interesting.
That's it. I'm gonna.
Steve, we don't need to know what you sat there in, mate. We really don't.
Well,
I love you to bits, but I don't want to know that, honestly.
Ghost Ops as pretty much he's always worth paying notice to in the comments because he's off his nut. We said you did an awesome job on this live. It was really informative. One thing could have made it better is Steve doing the tighty whities. We haven't ruled off green screen technology. We pretty much all got it, and we are going to all appear on camera. So all I can say, Brandon, is watch this space.
The thing is, though, if you think about Steve in tighty whities, what follows green screen is retinal damage.
Yeah, and memories you will never be able to erase. There you go. Shrimp, yes, I'll get on that. I'm glad you reminded me about that. I will get back to that. I will try and facilitate that happening for you. Yes, this was at 3 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning. So obviously no kids were wandering around in the middle of Stocksbridge. Thing is with Stocksbridge, if you've ever been to Stocksbridge, is any time past 10 p.m. the streets are completely deserted anyway. It's like the town itself knows that it's supposed to be haunted, and because of that, stays out of the way of itself. You know, it's
sounds like Moston, Steve. Sounds very like Moston.
I go to visit my son in Nottingham, so I come back that way, and sometimes it's late at night, and I'm telling you, it literally is like a ghost town.
Aren't they dancing Ring a Ring of Roses? The initial reports by the builders that were working on the bypass at the time is that's the kind of song that they heard. But it was hard to. It sounded like kids laughing or speaking in an excited way. They weren't singing when we heard them. Or at least it didn't sound to me like they were singing when we heard them. Have been many times over the years and heard children's voices at that location. But on this particular night, when me and Andy went, they weren't singing that, no, but it just sounded like excited voices of children. Like I said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning as well.
Steve, your camera's on, and it looks like you're suffering from quantum butterflies actually in the background there.
I'm caught between two dimensions. I apologise. Let me get.
That explains much.
Oh, hang on a minute.
Right, with it saying there, Matthew, I'm thinking of something that can't be picked up by their sensors. I'm guessing like a ghost camera. The thing is there is no evidence to suggest that they visually see the camera. So why try to trick them by hiding it? It's only us suggesting or going through the thought process of thinking that they can't see them, so that we need to hide them when we don't.
The other thing to remember, Matthew, is that cameras are designed to pick up electromagnetic radiation. So that's either in the visual spectrum, or it's in the infrared, or it's in shorter wave radiation like X-rays and so on. But we're talking about a very different sort of energy here, and that requires a certain sort of machinery. We really don't. It's not a question of a ghost camera, because, to be honest, we really don't understand the energies involved and what generates them. So it's a good idea, but
what you've also got to remember is that they're still dependent upon, if you're talking about a video camera, it's dependent upon light within a certain spectrum. Now, whether that's IR, whether that's visible white light, whether that's ultraviolet light, whatever nanometer, it's dependent upon the sensor, which is the recording medium, being able to pick up light. So it's still dependent upon putting out energy to receive an image, and that can be manipulated, if you like. So ghost cameras or hidden cameras, you may as well just have them out in the open.
Yep. I mean, technology itself is a wonderful thing, but to be honest, there's a very small number of things it can do and a very large number of things it can't, and that's one of them.
That is a good way of describing it, actually, Andy. Is the experience that we had, Mark, was that, like, the sound of children in a playground, really. And again, that we have had a couple of cameras crap out at the same time just before an experience, almost as if they've been compromised in some way. Yes, we've had cameras go down and various other bits of equipment go down just before an event's happened that we've seen personally, but not been able to record for obvious reasons that seem to be related to the event.
The other thing to say about modern cameras, I was trained on 5x4 plate cameras and large format mechanical cameras, and in those days the only things that were electronic on them were the early metering system. These days everything is electronic, and of course any disturbance in the ambient energy fields around a device will cause it to crap out. Anyone that's ever put a camera through an X-ray machine or
absolutely
around an electrical field will know that.
Yeah, which is explains the first image taken from Chernobyl being so pitted, and that is because of the radiation affecting the film. AE1 is an old 35mm camera. The only real electric components in that is, as Nod just said, is the TTL metering that you get in the display for exposure.
I have one, a Canon AE1. Yeah, absolutely.
Good camera, but apart from the like you say, the metering, it's a mechanical camera like the old Zeniths and so on and so forth.
The problem is now, of course, we are almost entirely, they become almost entirely electronic, and therefore they're more likely to crap out under those circumstances.
Yeah. That's that's the thing. We sort of leaving ourselves open to more problems with the electrical equipment, because the sheer amount of electrical equipment we're taking out to capture the phenomena. So I find it interesting that the toll on the M6 now has people saying they see Roman soldiers, but before the toll, it never happened in that area. No, I sort of see where you're coming from that one.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Parts of the city of London I worked in was on the old Roman remains around London Wall, and when they'd done excavations, they had more reports of weird occurrences and sightings, and very often I think the theory is that it disturbs something.
Never underestimate weird, brother.
No, well, I've known Steve all those years, so obviously
there you go. See, he knew where I was going with it, didn't he?
Yeah, of course I did. You set me up. There we go.
I'm sure electromagnetic fields are the most obvious smoking gun. Strange, says Marx. Well, I don't think any. Well, apart from the first hour of this particular video, I think everything since has been strange. Do you mean the Stocksbridge thing? Is that what you're referring to, Marcus Antonius Aurelius, general of a murdered father or whatever? I didn't quite get that quote at all.
Andy, that's a really interesting point about electromagnetic fields. The one thing that I do know about physics is that we are finding that more and more physical phenomenon and particles are actually caused by fields. I mean, Richard Feynman very famously said there's more energy in a square centimetre of empty space than it is needed to boil all the oceans on Earth. You know, we're just beginning to find that the very essence of matter, you know, the things that bind us together as organisms, they're not the particles themselves, but the fields that hold them together. So it's not just electromagnetic fields; it's all sorts of fields. I don't want to use the word quantum again because it sounds crap, but it is absolutely true that it's fields that hold the universe together, not particles. So yeah.
You see, it's a tough one, isn't it? Has the word quantum become crap or just crass? Either way,
it's both, because very often it's lazily. It's the lazy application of it, because we're talking about the very, very small, and we're also talking about the unpredictability of things. So, you know, the more that you measure something, the more you affect its outcome, and you can know its position and it on the one hand and its velocity on another, but not both, and that sort of thing. The real weird thing about quantum is every experiment that's been carried out to try and prove it has been successful. It is the most proven scientific theory in the world. It's never failed, and the fact that it's such a weird series of theories is, well, you know, is phenomenal.
What is your take on vibration and frequencies in spirit hunting? Sorry, Nodge, you hadn't finished there. I apologise for that. What were you going to say, sir?
No, it's because, well, I mean, it comes down to what Ghost Ops is talking about, vibrations and frequencies. You know, everything vibrates at a certain frequency, but it's finding the combinations, and it's also, you know, we have to acknowledge that there are things we can't measure at the moment.
I think just to throw a curveball in, the thing with Brandon, he's a great guy, and he will lull you into a false sense of security that is just a bit zany, and then when you least expect it, he'll throw a sensible question that will get you talking. So I think it's a good one, that, because I'm a firm believer in energy being responsible for all. You know, each to their own. I'm not a subscriber to organized religion or any kind of deities. I suppose you'd say in many ways I consider myself a universalist. And I think, you know, as Nudge was saying there, we everything is about the vibration.
Can I just
vibration? I hope it's good, seeing as I'm about to say something really profound.
Oh, will you say something profound first?
It's too late now. Go on. What do you need to say, Steve?
Oh, well, I'm a Reiki practitioner, and, you know, obviously energies, vibrational frequencies and stuff. That's what I work with in the healing process for many different things. So, for myself, I can honestly say that I do believe in the vibrational frequencies, energies, and all that, because I use them in my line of work for helping people. That's all I wanted to say. Nothing nasty, nothing else.
The dancing children in the fields sighted when they made the roads, all great stuff. They were heard. And I know one of them was called John Beat. When the police officers went to investigate the as of then unfinished bridge that went over, you know, that formed part of P-Royd that went over the bypass. That's where they thought they saw what looked like a monk Of course, then they had the banging on the car and the radio cutting out and the car refusing to start and then all of a sudden coming into life. So yeah, it is great stuff. It's a very, very interesting case, the Stocksbridge bypass case, Mark. Really interesting. Been there a few times, like I say. I've experienced quite a few different types of phenomena that have gone on there. So it's always thought provoking when I do get there. But you know, there's plenty of other places again that are just as interesting. But you get because it's an outdoor environment and spread out over such a large area. Because of course you've got the nearby town of Wortley where there's also phenomena being seen. The monk gets seen in fields that are in between Stocksbridge and Wortley. And on top of which, I'm trying to think, is it Gudgeon Hole Lane, I believe it's called. There was a guy sighted there that it could only be seen from the knees up. That seemed to be dressed like a Quaker and carrying a leather bag with change that was seen by two long distance runners. So the activity spread over a large area. I believe that the monk had been attributed to somebody that used to work at Underbank Hall. That's on the hillside, where the actual bypass was cut into to avoid all the traffic that obviously would go through the town itself and shake windows and everything. That's why the bypass came about, but spread over such a large area. Because of that, this isn't a place where people can make money by organising tours. Or by getting people to pay to stay the night like they can with other famous haunted locations in the UK, like the Jamaica Inn, say, for instance, or, you know, the ancient Ramin or Hellfire Caves or Cragginus Castle or, you know, various other St. Mary's Gate. There's lots of them throughout the UK where they'll charge you money to have a inverted commas, ghost hunting experience. Now, the Stocksbridge, the haunted bypass, is massively known for a lot of activity, but because it's spread out over such an area and because it's outdoors, it doesn't fall into the remit of that, because that a lot of people tend to pass it by. It doesn't get as much, I don't know, exposure as it deserves, perhaps. Oh, I actually thought that was more serious than it was, and I'd already clicked on it.
No, I'm not going to try and link string theory to that.
I don't know. I think you probably could if you wanted to. I think you're more than capable of doing that.
I probably am, but I'm not going to.
Let's have a look. The reason I asked was most EVPs are caught at frequency not being able to be spoken. A great deal of them are, yeah. When you do conduct spectral analysis on a lot of audio forms, dependent upon, there's lots of different software you can do this with. You will see artifacts left within the frequency range that aren't picked up by the human ear, but you can visually see them. And then by using certain filtration techniques, whether using notch filters or bandpass filters, a lot of people don't like to use filterization. They go off their earring. And I think a lot of people think that their earring's perfect, and that's the problem. You know, they might feel that by applying certain filters that they're messing with the audio. Well, of course they are messing with the audio. However, you do get a certain a signal noise ratio on any audio recording, a noise floor that the microphone and the internal circuitry of the recording device is using that are responsible for creating. And sometimes you have to pull sounds out of that noise floor, and the only way to do that is by either amplification or by filtration. And when upon spectral analysis and looking at some of these voices that are caught as EVPs, you can see that they don't fall within the human voice register. If that's where you're going with that one, which you think you are. Wow, yeah, if that's to the Stocksbridge thingamajiggy there, Mark, then absolutely, completely 100% wow. Good case, doesn't get a lot of exposure. Okay, so any more questions in chat or anything anybody wants to say before we shuttle off? Please let us know. Okay. Yeah, no problem at all, Mags. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you popping in and firing up the questions. Always causes a discussion, so we appreciate that. Thank you. We'll give it. And you've been told now, Steve. You got to behave.
I'm trying.
Well, yeah, we're all trying. We're all trying to behave.
You are very trying, Steve. I can attest to that.
Oh, thank you so much.
That'd be weird, wouldn't it? I mean, to be able to like pick out some kind of communication via artifacts left within the noise floor of. Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting. A lot of low frequency phenomena is normally reported within paranormal activity anyway, whether it's audible or ground vibration. So thanks very much, Mark. It's appreciate that you say that and appreciate that you spend your time listening to us.
Cheers, Mark.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so yup. Yeah, there you go. Okay, no worries, Brandon. Okay, if there is no more questions, I'll give it another minute or two, then we'll bring it to a close. Steve's he's well ahead of us in relaxing via intake.
No, I'm not. I don't know whether you're trying to make me out. I'm just sat here being quiet because I don't want to annoy anyone.
No, what I'm saying is you're ahead of us in regards to relaxing because you've had a drink or two.
No, just two.
Just two.
Yeah.
There you go. No problem at all, Mank. Mank. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, Matthew, thanks again. Okay, so I've not seen any questions, so we'll do the usual kind of thing. So thanks very much, Mark. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Brandon at Ghost Ops. Appreciated. Cheers, Max, for stopping by. Always nice to see you in the chat. Excuse me. Thanks, Andy, again, for the people out there. Andy conducts paranormal investigations with me when we get a chance to get out there. Thanks, David, for stopping by. Appreciated seeing you as always. I saw Beth in there, Shrimp Shack. Thank you very much. Massively appreciated. Definitely good to see you. I'm desperately trying to flick back through the Jane again. Oh, Jane, hi and bye, Jane, I suppose. Sorry, but thank you. I appreciate you popping by. Shire Ghost, thank you as always. And I can't go back any further. If I've missed you, I apologize. I thought I saw Lex earlier as well. If I saw you, Lex, if you were there, thank you. If you weren't, then why not? I nearly said thanks to Nodge. You've just seen him come up in the chat.
Oh, you're welcome.
Just click this ambient music, Nodge. And thanks to Ambi Infinity in the chat. Thanks to Steve. Oh, shit, hang on a minute. They're up here with me.
We're omnipresent, aren't we, Steve?
We try to.
Yeah. I saw Rev, so I've just remembered that Rev came in. Thanks for coming in, Rev. I remember seeing you, so I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. Selena, I'm sure. Yes, Selena, because I spoke to Selena Saul before. Selena, thank you. It was nice to see you. Nice. Always good to do that. Okay, so that's us done. Definitely an interesting case. Appreciate everybody sticking with us. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's the people in the chat, it's the people that watch this that make it. I want to thank Steve for coming up with a timeline and going through the events with us as he does. A good bit of research there, which obviously facilitates the conversation that we have. Thanks for Nodge, as always, for his spin on it. Have you guys got any closing thoughts before we call it?
Me? No, not at all. It's been a blast tonight, and it always is, for the simple reason every so often on a Friday night I can get to spend a lot of time in company of two good friends, simple as, and all my immediate chat family, if I can say that.
That's really well put, that, Steve. Thank you. Nudge.
Yeah, exactly what Steve said, Dave. It's always good fun. Just to pay testament to what Steve does. I mean, there's nobody I know better who's able to bring together a wide range of timelines and put it all into one narrative so well. So well done, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
And Ghost Ops, Brandon, you never fail to make me laugh. You know that. You know, big respect to you for coming in. You always make me smile and chuckle. That's why God invented the mute button on my microphone so people couldn't hear me laughing. You, you actually succeeded, and you've got a response telling you that. So no, you didn't fail. You actually succeed as much as you always do. Thanks very much for coming in. If you haven't already done so, people in chat, subscribe to one another, subscribe to Ghost Ops. He's always coming out with good material, good videos, good paranormal investigator, very level-headed, and believes in paranormal unity, which I also subscribe to. So check out Brander's channel, Ghost Ops. Also his missus at Ripley's Ghost Adventures, is it? I suppose if you want to correct me on that. Just a rundown of murder cases and serial killers, which is also very interesting and worth following. So do that. You've got Matthew at Second Star Survival. Subscribe to him too if you can do that. If you like your EDM, if you like your electronic music, if you like being absolutely tranced out and listening to some great tracks, check out Nodge's channel, which is the Ambient Infinity music channel there. And also check out Tachyon Radio. I'll put up a thingy. There we go. I'll quickly flick that across the bottom of the screen. There you go. It's that far in front. It meets yourself on the way back or something to that effect. I'm sure Steve can tell you about.
Yeah, not far off.
It's close enough, that, isn't it?
It certainly is.
There you go. So, check out Tachyon Radio as well. Steve's also got a YouTube channel where he discusses historical UFO cases. Please show that some love if you can as well.
It's absolutely brilliant, by the way. If anybody wants to know about famous UFO cases and see them, really well pulled together as interesting narratives, Worlds Beyond is Steve's podcast, YouTube broadcasts, which are really, really good. They work as straight documentaries.
The thing is he's got more sense than to invite me and Nodge, because he knows we'd ruin it. That's when it go.
No. Listen, man, there are big plans afoot. You two just don't know how to get dragged into it yet.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's all good. So check out Tachyon Radio. Check out Steve's channel. Check out Nodge's channel. Check out Second Star Survival. Check everybody out. Just do it, please. And thanks for very watching.
Rock-a-doodle-doo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Yeah, I haven't even ended and I'm missing them all already. Thanks very much. Bye-bye, guys.